Chapter 172 arrives at Qianji Island, but I heard that this time, high-level experts from various sects is coming to the gathering, so even if I go, it will be useless. Heishui said. Rest assured, they will not come. Some of our people will constrain them. Lu Hongwei indifferently said. At the same time, Yi Shiwen was listening on the side, and was suddenly startled because he never expected that Lu Hongwei would come here, and that too for such a purpose, that he was planning such a conspiracy. Well, in that case we will join you. My children also need to go out of this place, but still after all of this is finished, we want at least 30 county prefecture of the Great Yu coastal region. Heishui said. No problem. Lu Hongwei said. It seems that this trip to the Qianji Island will not be a smooth one. Yi Shiwen did not continue to eavesdrop and slowly swam out of the cave palace, disguised as a young deep-water black serpent. He didn't get discovered and slowly swam away without getting into trouble. After leaving the territory of Heishui, Yi Shiwen transformed back to his human form. These devils from Bai Majiao have spread everywhere, and are trying to win the support from various forces, and its tentacles even extend into the deep sea. Yi Shiwen said in a somewhat worried tone, although this level of fighting was not a big threat for him, now that he had stepped into the truth level, but it did not mean that he would not care. In fact, he was quite concerned about it because even in his past life he was a human, and in this life as well, he was a human, so how could he so easily accept the rule of the devils, let alone these devils were so brutal? I need to first rush to the Qianji Island and inform the sect about this. Yi Shiwen decided in his heart. Yi Shiwen felt particularly heavy in his heart. He could clearly sense that a great storm was going to hit this world and bring utmost chaos. The actions of Bai Majiao made him have a sense of approaching danger. This was the so-called feeling of having goosebumps, because once a Yuan school collapsed, then the consequences would simply be unimaginable. At present, Yi Shiwen just now stepped into the truth realm, and at his current strength, a truth-level master like him was indeed considered strong in the Great Yu state. Not to mention, Great Yu state was considered one of the strongest states in this big world. But even if Yi Shiwen went to the most powerful country, he would still have a certain status and would not be considering as some weakling. It could be said that only after achieving the truth realm, one could actually travel to the various states, but the Great Yu state would always be Yi Zaiwen's mother place, where his foundation lied, not to mention he was not alone. If he was alone, he could go wandering around the world and do what he wanted without caring about anyone or anything, but he was not. He still had his family and friends, and all of this was going to change a lot of things, and could endanger his family and friends, so he could not just stand idly and watch. He must get involved. Devil race would bring about war, destruction and chaos. If the very existence of devil race invoked destruction and chaos everywhere they went, if the devil race must win all that is present in front of their eyes, then Yi Shiwen didn't have a choice but to prepare himself for the extermination of devil race. This was the first time when Yi Shiwen had a strong wish to destroy an entire race. In this entire world, to Yi Shiwen, his family was the most cherished thing. Regardless of who tried to threaten their safety, he would treat them as his sworn enemy, even if the other party was the so-called infamous and terrifying devil race. If they threatened the safety of his family, then he wouldn't mind to eradicate their entire race if he had to in order to ensure the safety of his family. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen also had a feeling of urgency. His cultivation was far from enough, although it could be said that truth-level experts had the qualifications to participate in the mighty waves of war, but they were merely capable of performing as the one of the pawns, let alone acting as chess players. In fact, Yi Shiwen was not even capable of being the weighty chess piece. Only the masters at the level of those 4 strongest true disciples could be considered as weighty chess piece. The intense sense of urgency was forcing Yi Shiwen to have unceasing promotion in strength. And now, he must have a rapid growth in strength in a short time. Although Lu Hongwei also said that this fight might not end in a short period of time, but this short period of time was probably 10 years or less, one could not really say how much growth a truth-level master would have during this time, because for a true disciple like Yi Shiwen, this much of time was not going to be enough to have breakthroughs and level up. After that, Yi Shiwen quickly turned around and swam out of the sea. The intermittent waves of sea breeze was blowing against his face. Yi Shiwen looked at the nautical map, and after ascertaining his position and the relative position of his destination, Qianji Island, he flew in the direction of Qianji Island while riding a divine rainbow and instantly disappeared into the horizon. Unknowingly, Yi Shiwen had penetrated very far into the East China Sea, but Qianji Island was relatively close to the coastline, so he had to make a long flight to reach there. The flight to the Qianji Island took more than 2 days' time, and Yi Shiwen finally approached it. Qianji Island was a very large island. It was known as the territory of 1,000 clans, so the infrastructure on this island was actually ready-made and seemed quite extensive. Soon, Yi Shiwen flew into the range of Qianji Island, and from afar he saw some people at dispute. "Sister Hua, I have adored you for a long time. So long as you say yes, I will immediately go back and make my father come to propose for our marriage." Chapter 171, Roland in the Mud. "Sister Hua, I have adored you for a long time. So long as you say yes, I will immediately go back and make my father come to propose for our marriage." Yi Shiwen looked and saw that it was a young disciple, and looking at the clothes he was wearing, one could easily make out that it was actually the dress of Lu Yunqing disciples. Among the 4 big forces, Lu Yunqing had always been relatively close to the royal clan, which itself possessed formidable strength, and not just that, Lu Yunqing had always been supported by the royal clan, so this was one of the reasons why the royal clan had always been the most powerful among all the big forces of Great Yu State. A bunch of other Lu Yunqing disciples were standing behind that young disciple. "Pardon me, young city lord, but I have no interest in you." Hua Minghan frowned and said, "Also, I want to request young city lord to not waste any thoughts regarding this matter." The young city lord was about to continue speaking about it, when suddenly, with a loud bang, Yi Shiwen landed on the ground, and directly ignoring that young city lord, he arrived in front of Hua Minghan. Yi Shiwen. Hua Minghan did not expect to meet Yi Shiwen at this time. He was not present in the team of Yiyuan School when the team left for Qianji Island, and there was also no sign of him for the last several days. "Where is the deputy head? I have something important to inform him," Yi Shiwen said directly, because for him at this moment, this was the most important matter. Of course, Bai Majiao joined forces with He Shui and his army of sea beasts, and was planning to attack Qianji Island during the gathering of 5 forces, but according to him, this collaboration between Bai Majiao and He Shui could not be so simple and must not be taken lightly. This time, the gathering of 5 big forces of Great Yu State would most likely turn into a huge collision between the 2 sides, so nothing was more important than this matter, and the deputy head must be informed about it as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen knew that in this gathering, Yiyuan School's team was going to be led by the deputy head of Yiyuan School. "Who are you?" When the young city lord saw that Yi Shiwen suddenly arrived and started talking with Hua Minghan, without paying attention to him, he suddenly felt very uncomfortable. "This matter is very important." Yi Shiwen looked at Hua Minghan and said. Hua Minghan also seemed to feel that Yi Shiwen was not joking. She nodded and said, "Deputy head did not come together with us. Our leader this time is Brother Qi Fifan." "You insolent boy. Cannot you hear that our young city lord is talking to you?" At this time, standing behind that young city lord, a loud clamor suddenly resounded. It actually belonged to a master of Xiantian Great Realm. And not just him. There were several other masters of Xiantian Great Realm standing behind young city lord, and all of them were actually his personal attendants. And Yi Shiwen also found an old man standing not far from him, and he was at the 2nd stage of Truth Realm. Perhaps the status of this young city lord in Lu Yunqing should not be low, because he was actually at the 1st stage of Truth Realm, and one could easily guess that his future prospects were boundless. Moreover, he was called Young City Lord and should be one of the respected families of Lu Yunqing, and there was possibility that he might be the direct disciple of Lu clan, the vein of Lu Yunqing's city lord. But a member of Yiyuan School was far more different from a member of Lu Yunqing. The disciples of Lu Yunqing were relatively fixed, basically a direct descendant of the large or small families of Lu Yunqing. And it also had the vein of the city lord and 4 influential clans, making 5 big influences of Lu Yunqing. The strength of these 5 big influences was very enormous. And this system was only followed in the royal clan and Lu Yunqing. The ranking system followed in these 2 forces was very strict, from the beginning to end, These two forces had implemented a stern hierarchy: the suppression from the direct descendant of the lineage, the suppression of the low-status people from the high-status people. However, in the case of Yi Yuan school, this type of ranking system based on lineage rarely occurred. All of the disciples were ambitious to climb upwards. All only spoke with strength and talent. Those who were powerful and highly talented would naturally get better training and more resources from the sect, irrespective of their lineage. However, Lu Yunqing was no different than royal clan. Both of these forces differentiated based on bloodline. The people of noble blood would naturally get more resources, and compared to several other forces, the royal clan could get various resources of the country to support their disciples, so even if it was a kind of an abnormal policy, but it had still ensured the formidable strength of Lu Yunqing and royal clan. Although the system of differentiating based on the bloodline seemed somewhat biased, but it was undeniable that this was by no means without reason, because there has been genetic improvement in the royal clan over the years, as well as many of the strong men of royal clan had left more descendants. There were often many talented ones among these children of the royal clan, and occasionally, there would be the appearance of some peerless genius, who could maintain the prosperousness of the royal clan. However, Yi Shiwen simply did not care about these things. He immediately shouted to clear the way. "Get lost, do not hinder me." That young city lord's complexion suddenly became very unsightly. He was the young city lord, a nobility. It could be said that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His strength was outstanding, was a master at the first stage of truth realm. Even among the younger generation, he was considered a genius, sufficient to rule the roost. How could an existence like him be ignored and disrespected so casually? "Boy, do you know who you're talking to?" A warrior, standing behind that young city lord, gave a loud shout, and a big hand made up of lingqi instantly grasped towards Yi Shiwen. "Get lost!" Yi Shiwen shouted loudly, sending terrifying sound waves towards the incoming big hand. These sound waves were just like the sonic arrows which directly punctured the big hand made up of lingqi. "At present, I don't have free time to play with you. Do not mess with me." Yi Shiwen knitted his eyebrows and coldly said. He simply did not want to waste time on this spoiled son of a rich and influential clan. "You are courting death." The young city lord could not bear any more. He was enduring not because he was good-natured, but he actually wanted to maintain a good image in front of Hua Menghan and nothing more. But after hearing the words of Yi Shiwen, he lost his self-control. Right now, suddenly a feeling of embarrassment appeared in the heart of the young city lord. It was as if he was like a child who asked for a candy from an adult, and the adult said something very rude. So the child started rolling in the mud to force the adult to fulfill his wish. But the adult said that he had no time to accompany him playing in the mud. This feeling of being inferior to Yi Shiwen made him have an ashamed feeling. His face turned red like a red fruit. This was a type of an extreme feeling of being embarrassed. He was trying to act normal all this time because Hua Menghan was also present there, but in the end, he could not bear any more. 100 Stages God Fist. A fist fiercely rumbled towards Yi Shiwen. The Quan Jin went across the sky and instantly advanced towards Yi Shiwen. The strength contained in this fist attack had already reached an extreme level. One could see that young city lord was not intending to give Yi Shiwen an opportunity to react. A cold light flashed in the eyes of Yi Shiwen. He did not expect that the other party would actually dare to attack him all of a sudden. Moreover, he also seemed to have used his best and most powerful attack against Yi Shiwen. One could imagine the vicious intention in the heart of the young city lord. This technique called 100 Stages God Fist was exactly the same technique used by Dai Xiaohua, but compared to the fist technique of Dai Xiaohua, this was much more exquisite and countless times powerful. It could be seen that had almost reached the stage of perfection. Although the young city lord was quite annoying, but Yi Shiwen had to admit that he was capable enough to practice the 100-stage God Fist to such an extent. "You are courting death." Yi Shiwen shouted and rushed towards the opposite party. At this time, Yi Shiwen certainly would not retreat. He blasted an average fist towards the young city lord. It was not a fist technique. It was just an average mediocre punch, completely without any gaudiness and skill, just an average fist. There was nothing to simplify. It did not contain the unsurpassed deep meaning of some fist technique. It just simply relied on the fact that even an average fist of Yi Shiwen, without any skill or technique, was enough to crush that young city lord. Boom. Two fists fiercely collided together, and instantly, the fist pressure caused due to the collision set off an endless blast of intermittent waves of thunderstorms, accompanied by loud sounds, causing several air explosions that sent shock waves in all directions. Ta-ta-ta. The young city lord withdrew several successive steps before stopping. Well, big power and prestige, good way to vent off the anger. Yi Shiwen sneered, his figure flickered, and instantly he rushed towards the young city lord and blasted his fist at him. Again without the slightest skill, but this time, way before the fist could arrive. The terrifying fist pressure arrived in front of young city lord and pressed down on his body. When Yi Shiwen was at the Xiantian 9th stage, he was able to fight off a master at first stage of Truth Realm. And now that he had stepped into the Truth Realm, he was easily able to fight off a master at the 2nd stage of Truth Realm. And he could also compete with a master at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm. One must know that the difference between each of the 9 stages of Truth Realm was unimaginable big. Although right now, both Yi Shiwen and Young City Lord were at the 1st stage of Truth Realm. But the skill of Yi Shiwen had already reached a fearful point. And when he shot his fist, it completely manifested the true strength of Yi Shiwen, which was far more than the strength of a master at the 1st stage of Truth Realm. Boom. A terrifying coercion severely pressed upon his body. Poof! That young city lord spouted a mouthful of blood. There was a panic-stricken look in his eyes. He just could not believe that Yi Shiwen would actually be intrepid to such an extent. Yi Shiwen had already practiced restraining breath technique to a very profound level, and while using it he could hide a large section of his breath. So in the eyes of people, Yi Shiwen seemed like a warrior at the 1st stage of Truth Realm. They couldn't feel his extraordinary strength. He just seemed like an expert who recently stepped into the Truth Realm. However, after Yi Shiwen completely released his imposing aura, an alarmed and terrified look appeared on the face of Young City Lord when he discovered that the true strength of Yi Shiwen's strength was far beyond his imagination. The fist attack of Yi Shiwen encroached towards Young City Lord and arrived in front of him. The Young City Lord panicked and also issued several moves of 100 stages God Fist. But it was all in vain when all his attacks were completely crushed by an average fist attack of Yi Shiwen. Stop. At this time the old man, who was observing from the side, could not bear to watch anymore and directly shot his fists towards Yi Shiwen. This technique was 100 stages God Fist, and was much more powerful than the 100 stages God Fist of Young City Lord. The terrifying might of this technique, accumulated over so many years, was finally displayed instantaneously. Yi Shiwen sneered. His Zhen Yuan was so vigorous and profound that it was enough to finish most of the masters at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm, let alone of this old man, who was only at the 2nd stage of Truth Realm. Boom. Yi Shiwen's fist contained an irresistible force, after it eradicated the 100 stages God Fist and fiercely rumbled on the fist of that old man. Kara. Soon, a heart-penetrating sound of breaking bones resounded, and right after that, the old man groaned with pain. His arm was broken, twisted at a strange angle and hanging down. His skinny face was covered with numerous beads of cold sweat. As if there was storm rampaging in the old man's heart, he had practiced the 100-stage God Fists to the level of perfection, which was quite profound, and he was naturally very confident on the strength and sturdiness of his arm. But he did not expect a fist, just an average fist of Yi Shiwen, without any skill or technique, was able to crush his entire arm. But looking at the young appearance of Yi Shiwen, he couldn't help but shiver a bit. After all, there was a heaven and earth difference between their strengths. The old man was suddenly very depressed because he didn't know, in the end, what kind of body refining technique had Yi Shiwen practiced to achieve such a terrifying strength. He certainly did not know that Yi Shiwen had practiced tyrant body technique, and how overbearing and invincible strength it could grant to the practitioner. It was the technique practiced and developed by the ancient tyrants themselves. Yi Shiwen did not continue to pursue the fight with the old man, just looked coldly at the young city lord. The young city lord's face was immediately covered in cold sweat. Even the bodyguards of his family had terrified expressions on their faces. They clearly knew that if old man was not the match of Yi Shiwen, they could obviously not take on this opponent. They finally realized that they had made the biggest mistake of provoking a formidable person. The opposite party was a true disciple of Yi Yuan school. His status was not one bit less than the status of young city lord. True disciples were considered elite geniuses, treasures in Yiyuan school. Based on the ranks, young city lord and Yi Shiwen should be worthy opponents to each other. But when the actual strength was taken into consideration, even though both of them were at the first stage of Truth Realm, young city lord could barely resist against Yi Shiwen a moment ago. So it was now obvious to everyone that Yi Shiwen was far more stronger than the young city lord. Let's go. Yi Shiwen was not in a mood to waste time dealing with these people. Along with Hua Menghan, he directly went towards the station of Yiyuan School's team. Looking at their departing figures, the complexion on the face of that young city lord began to gradually become pale. He had never been treated like this before, and he had never been defeated like this as well. I want him dead. I want him dead. The young city lord roared. Yi Shiwen, why are you in such a hurry this time? Hua Menghan asked. I got the news. Bai Majiao has been colluding with the forces in the surrounding areas, and intends to perform a surprise attack on the gathering of 5 big forces of Great Yu State. Yi Shiwen said. Earlier he came to know from Hua Menghan that deputy head of Yiyuan School would not come, and now he was more determined about the news he heard, so it was truly right. Bai Majiao was really going to make a big move this time. Both of them were martial artists, although the coastline was from Yiyuan School's station. But they were very fast, and not after a while, they returned to the station of Yiyuan School. Sister Hua. Sister Hua. Brother Yi. The disciples of Yiyuan School respectfully gave their regards to the two. Especially when they saw Yi Shiwen, there were looks of astonishment on their faces. Now Yi Ziwen's strength had already been recognized by everyone. This was the strength of a true disciple. Although he had not yet become a true disciple, but the core disciples could no longer dare to address him casually. They could only call him respectfully as Brother Yi Shiwen. They went all the way and soon saw their team leader, Qi Fifan. Qi Fifan was leaning against the window. The sunlight was shining on his golden hair, and reflected soft bursts of golden light. Seeing Qi Fifan once again, he did not appear like the way he was when he was fighting that giant devil, because this time, there was a harmless and peaceful look on his face. There was faint smile spread on his handsome face. Yi Shiwen secretly sighed. No wonder they said that even if Qi Fifan was one of the 4 strongest true disciples, but if the popularity was taken into consideration, he was actually the best, although he joined the ranks late, so in terms of support from the elders, he was as good as the other 3, but in the hearts of ordinary disciples his popularity was far more than the other 3. Sister Hua, you seem so anxious to see me, what's the matter? Qi Fifan said. Brother Qi, Yi Shiwen, he has something important to inform you. Hua Menghan said respectfully. Yi Shiwen greets Brother Qi. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said, although the strength of both of them was at the truth realm, the status should also be equal, but the last time, Qi Fifan saved him and his friends, how could Yi Shiwen forget that? I am deeply grateful for your help last time. Oh, I guess you are one of the disciples from the Thousand Islands city. Qi Fifan finally remembered, but at the time, Yi Shiwen was just an ordinary disciple, especially in the eyes of Qi Fifan, who was at the half-step legendary level. However, seeing Yi Shiwen again this time, he could not look the other way, and now, Yi Ziwen's strength had actually reached the truth realm, and his breath was even above a master at the 2nd stage of truth realm. Looking at someone with such strength, how could he not pay attention? Regarding Yi Shiwen, these days, even he had heard of his miraculous growth rate and rapid enhancement of strength and cultivation, breaking his own records, which made Yi Shiwen the new myth of Yiyuan School. Many disciples of the younger generation idolized Yi Shiwen and regarded him as an example. Moreover, there were many rumors that Yi Shiwen was arrogant and despotic. He did not even pay attention to the elders and looked down upon them. But after meeting him in person, Qi Fifan realized that it was not like it. One should not completely believe the rumors. Brother Qi has such a good memory. I would have come early to express gratitude, but got tied down by many matters. Yi Shiwen said. No big deal. Qi Fifan said as if it didn't matter. Young Yi, what's this matter you want to inform me about? This time, I accidentally learned about the plans of Bai Majiao. Yi Shiwen told him about the things he overheard. but he would certainly not elaborate about his own transformation into a deep-water black serpent and other things he didn't want others to find out. So he vaguely passed on the information he obtained, without going into detail. But Chief Yifan did not pay attention to these either. Hearing the report from Yi Shiwen, Chief Yifan frowned and said, "Young Yi, you have discovered a very important thing. I will inform the higher authorities about it. But no matter what, this time, we must conduct this gathering." This gathering was not just a way for the five forces to show their strengths, but also a method to show their collective strength to other small and big influences of Great Yu State. Even if Bai Majiao was going to attack them, they could not cancel the gathering. Because even if Bai Majiao's raid is rendered unsuccessful, or they did not do it, then there was a chance that other forces might be ready to make trouble. Yi Shiwen can feel a terrifying pressure coming down towards Yiyuan School. In order to suppress the strong alliance of the five major forces, Bai Majiao would definitely have to do something big. Things won't be so simple then. Lu Hongwei, I have never fought with him before. Chief Yifan immediately said with a smile on his face. The previous uprising of Bai Majiao occurred 100 years ago, and during that turmoil, he was not even born at that time. Among the present strongest four true disciple, only he had not fought with Lu Hongwei, but looking at the illustrious reputation of Lu Hongwei, he always wanted to fight with him. Chief Yifan already confessed that he would not lose to anyone else. Even if he was late to join the ranks of the strongest four true disciples, it was not an excuse for him. The gathering of the five forces must continue, but they needed to prepare before. If they didn't know about it, then it was a different matter, but now that already knew about the attack in advance, they naturally could not ignore it. They must prepare to teach those bastards of Bai Majiao a profound lesson. Otherwise it would be a waste of the news brought by Yi Shiwen. After informing Chief Yifan about this matter, there was nothing to worry about. Yi Shiwen finished this thing and soon bid farewell to Chief Yifan. He went to the courtyard reserved for him, and began to prepare for closed-door practice. He simply didn't care about the inner disciples' competition. Only after the Bai Majiao's attack would he really start caring about other things. Chapter 173. Rise to Fame. Yi Shiwen did not want to look for trouble, but it did not mean that trouble won't look for him or his friends. When Yi Shiwen was indulged in closed-door practice, overnight, a news spread throughout Qianji Island, and all the five forces paid attention to it. Did you hear the latest news? 8th Prince is aiming for that Yi Shiwen of Yiyuan School. We may be able to see a stunning battle between the two. What? 8th Prince, the universally invincible genius of this generation from the royal clan. He is considered invincible even among the peer disciples of the royal clan. But why is he aiming for Yi Shiwen? Oh right, who is this Yi Shiwen anyway? Till yesterday even I didn't know who this Yi Shiwen actually is, but today, I finally found out about his identity. The supremeness of 8th Prince is widely known among the younger generation of royal clan. His followers can be seen throughout the five forces and various other large and small forces. He has also formed his own army by the name Imperial Guards, which claims to dominate the entire world. But that Yi Shiwen recently rose to fame in Yiyuan School as an invincible genius. It is said that he has broken the records of the legendary genius, Chief Yifan, of Yiyuan School. Just like Chief Yifan, Yi Shiwen is also considered a mythical figure, a myth in his sect. But I heard that 8th Prince was chasing down a devil, and has gone inside the space crack. Why did he challenge Yi Shiwen right on? I also just heard that the 8th Prince chased down the devil all the way inside the space crack and actually discovered the remains of some treasure. He gained enormous benefit from it, and now has come back from there. As to say why he challenged Yi Shiwen right on. The reason is very simple. The 8th Prince is very ambitious. He actually wants to conquer the entire world, dominate all of the landscape, then bring the entire Great Yu State under the rule of the royal clan. He is also known as universally invincible. Wants to defeat all the rivals in the younger generation one by one, and after that he will even challenge Chief Yifan and the older invincible masters of the older generation. It is said that the 8th Prince had once fought with Luo Yifan, but now Luo Yifan is dead, and rumors are that it was actually Yi Shiwen who killed Luo Yifan, which aroused the interest of 8th Prince. I heard that 8th Prince issued the declaration of challenge, right from the Azura battlefield, which arrived now. Eighth Prince is universally invincible among the disciples of same age. Perhaps only Jian Wuchen of Yunqing should be able to compete with him. Yes, but it's ironic enough that Jian Wuchen belongs to a slave clan. But even so, he was able to achieve the reputation of strongest disciple among the younger generation of Yunqing. And it's just like a slap in the face of those who belong to the strongest clans of Yunqing and possess noble blood. This is just like the collision between the most noble blood and lowly cheap blood. Don't forget, in addition to Jian Wuchen of Yunqing, Mu Yuran of Shuling sect and Yan Xiaoba of Tianfeng Hall are also considered the top players among the younger generation. Over the past decade, the rise of a genius in the younger generation was the most crucial matter for Yi Yuan school among the five forces, although there is Qi Fifan and 3 other peerless masters among the older generation, but none of disciples in the younger generation were splendid enough to be added to this list. Although Luo Yifan was an outstanding master, but his strength was undoubtedly still not comparable to the others. Then suddenly, this Yi Shiwen came to limelight out of nowhere. Eighth Prince is ambitious. He wants to wipe out all of the experts of the younger generation and lead his imperial guards to sweep the entire world under the royal clan's rule. I do not know how Yi Shiwen will be able to resist the moves of the Eighth Prince. Suddenly, the news about the legendary Eighth Prince personally challenging Yi Shiwen spread like forest fire, and in a short time, Yi Ziwen's fame spread among the various forces. Although originally, Yi Shiwen had defeated Luo Yifan in a one-on-one battle, but he also set a remarkable record in Yi Yuan school by breaking the records of Qi Fifan. Not to mention, too much time had passed since then and Yi Shiwen preferred to have a relatively low-key status, so his fame was limited only in Yi Yuan school, and almost nobody in the other sects knew about his exploits in Yi Yuan school. But the open challenge of the Eighth Prince suddenly pushed Yi Ziwen's fame all the way to the top. Yi Ziwen's image as one of the notable figures in the younger generation began to embed in the hearts of countless people, but even so, no one was optimistic about his victory. After all, the Eighth Prince had been famous for almost a decade. When he began to become famous, perhaps Yi Shiwen had not even started practicing martial arts. Although regarding martial artists, the time gap of 10 years was not too much. When compared to the time of over 100 years, the time period of 10 years didn't seem much significant, but as far as Yi Ziwen's age was concerned, the last 10 years were sufficient to cause a fatal disparity of several years. Moreover, Eighth Prince had deeply infiltrated everyone's heart. Even if he and Yi Shiwen were of same age, no one would really be optimistic about Yi Shiwen, let alone knowing that Yi Shiwen was several years younger than him. Although they could be counted as peers, but the age gap was significant to cause a disparity in their strengths. In fact, none of the various forces were optimistic about Yi Shiwen, which also made some people of Yi Yuan school secretly angry. Originally, Yi Shiwen was not pleasing to the eyes of everyone. There were many people who did not like the way Yi Shiwen gained sudden fame. But this was a matter related to the honor of Yi Yuan school. And just because of that, many of them were standing on the side of Yi Shiwen and speaking in his favor. Even if sects could inherit resources generations after generations, they always tend to keep an eye constantly on the performance of the younger generation. Especially in the case of Yi Yuan school, which held the heritage of so many years, and also had a lot of talented disciples. But even so, unlike other sects where outstanding talents took birth in the younger generation in the past decade, Yi Yuan school seemed to have only one hope, Luo Yifan, in their younger generation who could hold a chance of contending with the Eighth Prince. Although Luo Yifan was regarded as splendid in Yi Yuan school's younger generation, but when compared to strongest disciples of younger generation in other sects, the discerning eyes could easily see the disparity. But they were not optimistic about Yi Shiwen even if he had defeated Luo Yifan because they assumed that perhaps Yi Shiwen was only slightly stronger than him, and was definitely not the opponent of the Eighth Prince. However, the open challenge from the Eighth Prince to have a duel with Yi Shiwen still made them feel incomparably aggrieved, because the Eighth Prince, Jian Wuchen, Mu Yuran and other top figures in the younger generation of the major forces were considered at the helm of the younger generation of their respective sects, and the major sects, intentionally or unintentionally, never allowed them to have direct confrontation. Everyone felt that these top figures would eventually step into the legendary realm in the future, and might go even farther. And perhaps then, they might collide in the future to determine the winner, but fighting now was somewhat early. However, the 8th prince causally announced the challenge, and brought this to light that he would beat Yi Shiwen, which clearly explained that he looked down on Yi Shiwen, and radically speaking, the 8th prince did not consider Yi Shiwen as his equal. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen simply did not qualify to be his match, but Yi Shiwen was already considered the strongest in this younger generation of Yi Yuan school after he defeated Luo Yifan. Now that he disregarded Yi Shiwen and basically looked down on him, he also looked down on the entire Yi Yuan school. So even if they were not optimistic about Yi Shiwen, but overwhelming majorities were still in his favor. 8th prince is not that great. If Yi Shiwen had practiced for few more years, he could easily beat the 8th prince. Yes, if 8th prince thinks he is strong, he should fight with our brother Qi. After all, just like he is older than Yi Shiwen, brother Qi is older than him. There were some people who turned to Qi Fifan. Brother Qi, stop their duel. It is so unfair for brother Yi Shiwen. Yes, if given few more years to a talent like brother Yi Shiwen, he should be able to compete with this opponent. Yi Shiwen might not be pleasing to their eyes, but this matter was directly linked with the honor of Yi Yuan school. Hence it was closely linked with them as well. And they were well aware that its outcome would not be a good one. But Qi Fifan had not made an appearance, because at this time, he was discussing the matter about Bai Majiao with the leaders of other forces. However, from the beginning since this matter came to light, many of the inner disciples, core disciples and even some true disciples could not sit still. The deterrence of 8th prince was not just for the disciples of younger generation. It was like a thorn in the back even for the true disciples of the older generation. It was just like disregarding the opinion of Yi Yuan school altogether, which immediately made them angry. 8th prince had always been rejecting the challenges from the younger generation of Yi Yuan school, and once fought with Luo Yifan, and almost missed from completely crippling him. If he had succeeded in crippling Luo Yifan, he would have completely cut off the one and only hope of Yi Yuan school, since Luo Yifan was considered the strongest in the younger generation. But now Luo Yifan was dead and Yi Shiwen suddenly gained fame, so 8th prince decided to personally beat him, and announce the beginning of his domination. Now on Qianji Island, only Qi Fifan was capable of stopping their duel. However, the very first sentence that came out of Qi Fifan's mouth was, "This generation's conquest will advance." Obviously, Qi Fifan did not want to prevent the duel. Moreover, it was apparent from his words that he seemed optimistic about Yi Shiwen, which shocked many people. Regarding Qi Fifan's vision and decision, no one would suspect because his very existence itself was like a legend and mythical. If his rise to fame had been somewhat late, then perhaps he would belong to the generation of the 8th prince, Jian Wuqian and the others. In that case, he would be the only genius in his generation, like the one and only sun in the sky, filled with radiance, and all others would be overshadowed by his existence. This was the reason why even the other top 4 true disciples of Yi Yuan school were scared of him. Not to mention the 8th prince and the other strongest disciples of younger generation. However, in his generation, no one was able to reach his brilliance for decades. He was recognized as the first master of his generation. No one could compete with him, so later he was placed in the older generation, and was allowed to join the ranks of top 4 true disciples of Yi Yuan school. His words suddenly shocked everyone, as if they heard something wrong when Qi Fifan said in favor of Yi Shiwen. But 8th prince was already at the 4th stage of Truth Realm, and there were rumors that he recently obtained some treasures and other great benefits, and would soon step into the 5th stage of Truth Realm. Rumors were that he obtained some ancient relics and treasure which were enough to help him overwhelm all his peers and rivals. Why Yi Shiwen? What made Qi Fifan say in favor of Yi Ziwen's victory? Did he actually think that Yi Shiwen could turn out to be a rival of the 8th prince? Chapter 174. Simply worthless this time. The leaders of all segments of social strata among the younger generation of the 5 forces had gathered in Qianji Island. The news about the 8th prince openly challenging Yi Shiwen for a duel quickly set off the speculations of a lot of people. Even the only speculation of the disciples of Yi Yuan school was that Yi Shiwen would be able to block a few moves of the 8th prince at the best. No one really thought that he would be able to contend with the 8th prince. Defeat the 8th prince? The very concept of defeat simply never existed in their thoughts. For a time, no one paid attention to the forthcoming meeting of the 5 forces. Everyone was discussing this matter about the duel between the 8th prince and Yi Shiwen. After all, 8th prince was considered as the strongest existence among the younger generation of all the forces, so no matter what he did, it always ended up becoming the object of attention for countless people. He rushed to his current illustrious prestige in a short time of 10 years, and was now at the helm of the younger generation. He almost did not have a rival. He was ambitious and wanted to compete for the throne of Great Yu State and become the next emperor. For that, he needed to sweep away all the other major forces and establish a more centralized influence of royal clan in the Great Yu State. Regarding this matter, he never tried to conceal it, and in fact, even his slogan clearly showed that he was ambitious to win over the entire state. He formed a party of 8, and all of these 8 outstanding masters were known as Imperial Guards. He simply regarded himself as the next emperor of Great Yu State, and his Imperial Guards were just like the personal guards of the emperor. He dared to call his subordinates as Imperial Guards, and their motto was to conquer the world and bring it under the royal clan's rule. No one knew the real reason behind it, but his group had already been recognized by the Great Yu State's emperor. Yi Shiwen did not know whether to laugh or cry when he listened to the people's discussion outside. What was wrong with these people? When he said that he would accept the challenge, it was as if it was already decided and no one was going to ask his opinion or decision. It seemed as if he did not have the right to say anything, and would have to comply with the command of the 8th prince. Without even asking him, it seemed like his duel with the 8th prince had already been scheduled. What was going on? There really didn't seem any respect for his opinion. No one seemed to really care about his opinion. Everyone was fully convinced that since 8th prince challenged Yi Shiwen, then he would certainly have to accept the challenge. This strange logic simply left Yi Shiwen in a situation where he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In fact, a lot of people thought that since the 8th prince had already announced his challenge, even if Yi Shiwen was not his match, whatever might be the outcome of this duel, being the most outstanding disciple in the younger generation of Yi Yuan school, he should not be able to decline this challenge. Thereupon, everyone was considering this thing as a matter of fact. Yi Shiwen was sincerely mad at this. He was being regarded as an insignificant existence, as if he really didn't have the fundamental right to make his own decisions, and no one seemed to care about what he was thinking. Just because the 8th prince openly challenged him, he had no choice but to comply and engage in a duel with him. At noon, the sunlight was shining on the earth, distorting the atmosphere. Things looked blurred from afar. The battle declaration was handed down right in front of Yi Shiwen. 8th prince has sent us to relay this battle declaration to you. 3 months later he would personally visit Yi Yuan school to have a duel with you. Be prepared by that time. Out of the 3 people who came with the battle declaration, the black-robed youth looked at Yi Shiwen and said, 8th prince was not an ordinary overbearing and rampant guy. This battle declaration was to play with the minds of the disciples of Yi Yuan school. At least, his motive was to make sure there were no rival disciples in his generation, and new rivals were to appear. He would destroy them before become threats to his ultimate plan. It was a well-known matter, but the place of their duel was actually going to be Yi Yuan school, which was just a way to mock someone on their face. It was a blatant way to mock someone. Later, Yi Shiwen came to know that these 3 people were actually not the disciples of the royal clan. They were actually the outstanding figures of other major forces. The name of this black-robed youth was Jiao Shufeng, an outstanding disciple of Tianfeng Hall. Long ago, he became renowned as a strong true disciple, and was quite formidable. This time he was representing Tianfeng Hall, and was going to compete in the competition of true disciples. Another handsome man around the age of 25 or 26 years was standing behind him. He was clad in an orange robe, and was called Lu Hao, one of the talented disciples of Yunqing. He was also very formidable, and was going to represent Yunqing in the competition of true disciples. And the last one was a woman, clad in white clothes, looked very pretty, and her name was Jean Linger. She was actually a disciple of Yi Yuan school, and was widely known among the disciples of Yi Yuan school. There were many disciples who admired her very much. In fact, it could be said that she had innumerable admirers in Yi Yuan school, but no one expected her to be a member of Imperial Guards. Jiao Shufeng spoke, but from the look in his eyes, he did not seem to be paying attention to Yi Shiwen at all, as if he was here just to issue the declaration of duel, and Yi Shiwen would certainly accept it. "I'm not interested." Yi Shiwen suddenly smiled and said. "What you?" Jiao Shufeng suddenly said. It seemed as if he never expected to get such a reply from Yi Shiwen. He never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually say that he did not have the slightest interest in it. Before coming to meet Yi Shiwen, he had imagined various scenarios, but he never expected Yi Shiwen to directly reject the 8th Prince's declaration. He expected that either Yi Shiwen would be angry or terrified after receiving the declaration of duel, but he definitely did not expect it to get such an unexpected answer from Yi Shiwen, and that too in an indifferent manner. Immediately, the disciples in the surroundings gathered up to see what was going on, and when they heard Yi Ziwen's reply, dumbfounded looks appeared on their faces. A sudden uproar occurred in the crowd. They could clearly see that this Yi Shiwen was no less rampant than the 8th Prince. Everyone was aware of the arrogance and domineering attitude of the 8th Prince. If he said he wanted to fight with someone, that person would have no other choice but to obediently comply. His arrogance could be seen in the very fact that he openly challenged Yi Shiwen, even if he knew that Yi Shiwen was not his match, without caring about Yi Ziwen's opinion. In fact, if there was someone more powerful than Yi Shiwen in the younger generation of Yi Yuan school, then perhaps he would not even look at Yi Shiwen. This was the kind of arrogance he had, which was enough to make him dominate the entire world. However, this seemingly casual remark of Yi Shiwen showed that he was no interested, implying that he was much more aggressive than the 8th Prince. Yi Ziwen's words implied as if who was this 8th Prince? He never heard of some 8th Prince. Why should he care about this declaration of duel? There could be no better valid and powerful comeback than this. Yi Shiwen finished saying, then turned around to walk away. But suddenly, a loud shout came from behind him. "Stop!" Lu Hao arrived in front of Yi Shiwen and said, "And you still call yourself a man? You are actually trying to run away. Do you want to become a laughingstock in front of everyone?" Yi Shiwen disdainfully smiled because he knew that today, if he turned around to leave, then it was not going to be him who would become the laughingstock, but the 8th Prince. People were too lazy to understand what was hidden in the words of Lu Hao. It could be said that these were coarse words and Lu Hao seemed to be speaking for Yi Shiwen, but in actuality, he was speaking for the 8th Prince. Somehow, it is none of your business. Yi Shiwen squeezed out these words from the gap between his teeth, and it sounded unusually disdaining. "What did you say? A coward like you, who wants to run away from a fight, actually dares to be so arrogant? I see, so you must be afraid of His Highness." Lu Hao said. "Yes, Yi Shiwen, you want to flee without a fight, then do so, but it will hurt the reputation of our Yi Yuan school. And after this, how you think will others see the disciples of our Yi Yuan school?" At this time, the female disciple named Jean Linger suddenly said, What utter nonsense." Yi Shiwen coldly smiled and said, "You seem so concerned about how others will see our Yi Yuan school. But don't worry. The disciples of Yi Yuan school are proper and prideful. They don't need to go to someone else and work like their dog. But sometimes I think, if our Yi Yuan school had such a disciple, I wonder how other people will see our Yi Yuan school." "You." The face of Jean Linger suddenly flushed with anger. She gritted her teeth and her eyes looked straight at Yi Shiwen, as if she would tear him to shreds with her vision itself. She had never hated a man so much in her life because Yi Shiwen actually likened her with a dog. She never felt that there was something wrong following a strong person. After all, strength was the ultimate law in this world. Not to mention the 8th Prince was considered a peerless master, and she held supreme honor as his follower. But all of this was torn to pieces by the few words of Yi Shiwen. The looks in the eyes of several disciples standing in the surroundings suddenly changed, because they had never thought about it in such a way. But after listening to what Yi Shiwen said just now, it seemed correct. What Imperial Guards? Weren't they working like dogs for someone else? Still the most loyal dogs. This also made her simultaneously feel ashamed and resentful towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if they wanted to kill Yi Shiwen then, and there to vent their hatred. Yi Shiwen, if you are scared, kneel down and kowtow, then I will ask our 8th prince to let you off. Jean Linger said viciously. She wanted that Yi Shiwen must kneel down and kowtow in order to crush his invincible heart, and only then she would be able to calm her anger down a little. What an idiot! Yi Shiwen coldly smiled, then turned around to walk away. What 8th prince? I have never heard of him. If he wants to fight with me, it's very simple. Tell him to come in person and challenge me. If he likes to put on airs, then he should stop thinking that these things would have any effect on me. The whole crowd was in uproar after hearing this. After all, the words of Yi Shiwen were a direct hit on the 8th prince's face, and saying what 8th prince in front of so many people was like a directly insult to the 8th prince. This completely angered the 3 members of the Imperial Guards. I know that he is afraid. Our 8th prince is the strongest character in the younger generation, and he is just an ant-like ordinary guy in front of him. Now he has certainly gained a clear understanding of his own pathetic existence. Lu Hao said in a harsh tone. Yi Shiwen, you are really very scared, aren't you? Jiao Shifeng looked at Yi Shiwen and said. Your foolish attempt to instigate me into action won't work. Yi Shiwen indifferently said. Do not think that I am like you people. Perhaps for you all, this 8th prince is everything, a godlike existence or something, but as far as I am concerned, he is simply worthless. Chapter 175. He is also a ruthless man. Your foolish attempt to instigate me into action won't work. Yi Shiwen indifferently said. Do not think that I am like you people. Perhaps for you all, this 8th prince is everything, a godlike existence or something, but as far as I am concerned, he is simply worthless. The crowd was in uproar. This was probably the first time someone dared to say something like this, which implied that the 8th prince could simply not be considered as someone of any important personage. This showed that Yi Shiwen was not just ordinarily rampant as they thought. Although they were full aware of the domineering and arrogant attitude of the 8th prince, but they just did not expect that the seemingly calm rampancy of Yi Shiwen would actually be far more intense than that of the 8th prince. However, in such a short time, Yi Shiwen was able to emerge as a peerless genius from Yi Yuan school. So if his disposition was modest and polite, then that would feel quite strange too. But they actually did not know that Yi Shiwen was not always rampant. He was rampant in front of his rampant enemies. I knew that he will try to run away. Even the gods flinch in the presence of His Highness, and the devils hide away. Lu Hao said, and it seemed as if he was determined to keep instigating Yi Shiwen. It really is ridiculous. Even the gods flinch in his presence. Does he try to regard himself as the king of gods? Yi Shiwen sneered. Of course, devils existed in this world, so it was not surprising to say that gods also existed in this world. Just listening to the things told by Yi Mo, he came to know that there were godlike existences in this world, and they were capable of destroying the heaven itself, but it was quite hilarious to say that gods would flinch in the presence of the 8th prince. No one can refuse the decree of His Highness. Jiao Shifeng shouted in a cold voice and threw an envelope toward Yi Shiwen. In the midair, the envelope started to burn and revealed a domineering and overbearing string of pearl-like characters. Although it was just one word, but it seemed as if it would burn the eyes of the people who laid their eyes on it. Those who saw it only thought that they must kneel down in front of his dominating power and become his subjects. They must obey his command. This was the aura of a king. But unfortunately, Yi Shiwen was also an overbearing expert, and was no inferior to any tyrant king. He himself possessed the terrifying aura of a tyrant warrior, was about to get involved, but suddenly, the characters written inside envelope quickly moved and folded up to transform into a mountain peak, and instantly pressed towards Yi Shiwen. This mountain peak pressing down towards Yi Shiwen actually possessed a mighty imposing aura. Yi Shiwen immediately sensed that the law of the earth was in effect. It was as if a mountain was dropping from the heaven, and it must crush Yi Shiwen. This was to test Yi Shiwen and prove that he was not eligible to accept the challenge, and there was actually a surging Zhenyuan hidden inside it. It was really quite rampant and despotic. However, although it was merely only condensed Zhenyuan, but was simply relentless, and it possessed strength almost comparable to the 3rd stage of the truth realm, and instantly smashed down. Full Moon Beheader. Yi Shiwen did not dare to be negligent. although he could compete with masters at the third stage of Truth Realm. But while facing this move, he would still need to concentrate with rapt attention. Boom. The blade light fiercely chopped down towards that word mountain peak. The two attacks deadlocked for a long time. But the blade light finally overpowered the coercion of that word mountain, and directly chopped it down into pieces, dispersing golden light everywhere in the sky. Yi Shiwen did not have the frivolity, rather the strength of the 8th prince was quite spectacular. And he noticed some words written on that word mountain, strongest of the younger generation. And these were not empty words. This 8th prince was very strong. Oh, it's not good. I never imagined that the 8th prince would actually be so strong. Even the battle declaration was so outrageously strong. I guess even the masters at the third stage of Truth Realm will find it difficult to deal with this kind of strength. A Yuan School's disciple said in a somewhat worried voice. At this time, except for a few people, most of the disciples of Yuan School were still biased in favor of one of their own, Yi Shiwen. After all, this matter was related to Yuan School's glory. Luckily, Yi Shiwen is not some ordinary guy. That blade attack was amazing. I heard that he has recently turned 20 years old, and has already stepped into the Truth Realm. Considering this level of talent, he is not inferior to the 8th prince. If he is given few years, he should be able to contend with the 8th prince. Another disciple said, if Yi Ziwen's fame rises, the younger generation of our Yuan school will not lose to the other sects. However, I am afraid that the 8th prince will not give him the time to grow. Isn't this the style of the 8th prince to suppress all enemies before they grow stronger? Yes, if it is that Jian Wuchen fighting with Yi Shiwen, then it may seem fair, but why is the 8th prince so fixated on him? The 8th prince's ambitions have no limits. He wants the entire Great Yu state to fall under the rule of the royal clan. He doesn't even want to accommodate a force like Yuan School, and wants to suppress all his future obstacles, including those who are yet to grow up. Many of the disciples of Yuan School were worried, though they clearly recognized the strength of the 8th prince, but regarding his character, it was not easy to say. With such a mediocre strength, you actually dare to be so rampant? Lu Hao sneered and immediately taunted after he saw Yi Shiwen having some difficulty while dealing with the 8th prince's gift. Naturally, he was very proud of himself because according to him, the members of the Imperial Guards were far superior to other truth-level masters. Their leader was the strongest in the younger generation. In fact, most people were not even qualified to become the Imperial Guards. It was not easy to become the Imperial Guards. Enough with your nonsense. Yi Shiwen was quite unhappy. This 8th prince was not an ordinary rampant guy. Considering the way he used the open battle declaration in front of everyone, now it did not matter whether Yi Shiwen wanted to fight or not. He must accept it. Yi Shiwen was sure that the opposite party would certainly direct it towards Yuan School's reputation, regardless of whether he would comply or not. Yi Shiwen was not just representing himself, but he was also representing the entire Yuan School in this matter. It was time for Yi Shiwen to make the decision whether he should accept it or not. If he didn't, then everyone would say that Yi Shiwen was afraid and backed out. This was tantamount to force him to accept this battle declaration, which made Yi Shiwen him extremely unhappy. You are courting death. Why His Highness should dirty his hands and deal with you when I can personally repress you? Lu Hao was thoroughly mad at the attitude of Yi Shiwen. You don't deserve to accept His Highness' battle declaration. When Yi Shiwen heard him, without wasting any time, he instantly took a step, and suddenly, a burst of Zhen Yuan, like the raging wild sea waves, instantly swept toward Lu Hao. Yi Shiwen released a surge of Zhen Yuan which was so huge that it was easily comparable with the masters at the third stage of Truth Realm, while Lu Hao was merely a master at the second stage of Truth Realm. At this time, Lu Hao and the others finally understood that although Yi Shiwen seemingly was at the first stage of Truth Realm, but looking at his terrifying Zhen Yuan which could easily submerge them like a raging ocean, it was easy to guess that his strength was much more than what it appeared to be. This could not be the strength of a man. He was simply a humanoid demon beast. The endless amount of Zhen Yuan, just like a mighty hammer, instantly and fiercely blasted on Lu Hao's body. Poof! Lu Hao screamed pitifully and his entire body was sent flying into the sky. The crowd of onlookers suddenly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and held their breaths. Just now they witnessed the stunning strength of the 8th prince from just the battle declaration envelope, and it was actually able to have such strength. But now, they found out that Yi Shiwen must not be underestimated, and his actually strength was much more than they anticipated. As a master at the first stage of Truth Realm, he was able to actually release such mighty waves of Zhen Yuan, which sent a second stage truth level master like Lu Hao flying into the sky. At this time, the disciples of Yi Yuan school were having a kind of mixed feelings in their hearts. They were happy from the performance of Yi Shiwen. It was really too aggressive and was nothing like a master at the first stage of Truth Realm. He actually managed to suppress a genius like Lu Hao, who was at the second stage of Truth Realm, and actually sent him flying in one shot. This fighting strength was simply ferocious. As if he was a humanoid demon beast, there simply was no comparison between Yi Shiwen and Luo Yifan. Because Luo Yifan was merely at the first stage of Truth Realm, and Yi Ziwen's strength was comparable with the masters at the third stage of Truth Realm. No wonder there were rumors that Yi Shiwen had defeated Luo Yifan in one-on-one battle. In fact, there were even rumors that Luo Yifan's death was also related to Yi Shiwen. Rumors said that after receiving the message, Yi Shiwen went after Luo Yifan to kill him. Even after investigating, both Yi Yuan School and Tianfeng Hall were unable to get any evidence against Yi Shiwen, but this rumor had been spreading since then. Many people were saying that it was actually Yi Shiwen who killed Luo Yifan. Contradiction between Luo Yifan and Yi Shiwen was already an open secret, and everyone knew about it. Luo Yifan tried several times to intercept Yi Shiwen, sometimes personally or by sending people after him. The news about these things had already spread throughout Yi Yuan School. There was no room for either party to back out from the fact that both parties wanted to kill each other. In order to stamp out the root of future trouble, it was very natural for Yi Shiwen to kill Luo Yifan. Things like this happened all this time. Although no one had the direct evidence to prove that Yi Shiwen killed Luo Yifan, but they were greatly suspicious of him. Therefore, reportedly, it was said that Luo clan was furious and were planning to kill Yi Shiwen, but the top-level officials of the sect disagreed since Yi Shiwen was just a suspect, and there was no exact evidence to prove that he killed Luo Yifan. Not to mention, along with Luo Yifan, there were two other truth-level masters, and therefore, a lot of people concluded that it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to simultaneously deal with three masters of the Truth Realm, considering that one of them was at the second stage of Truth Realm. However, after Yi Shiwen exposed his true strength just now, everybody was shaken because his real strength was simply unfathomable, and was much more terrifying and profound than anticipated. With this much strength, it should be easily to kill Luo Yifan and the other truth-level masters. But some time had passed since the incident, so the strength alone could not be solid evidence. After all, how could ordinary mortals possibly find the traces of clues when the evidence and traces of clues were personally erased by Yi Mo, an ancient monster that had lived for innumerable years? The thing to worry was that now when Yi Shiwen exhibited such a high talent, the 8th prince would certainly not give up, because in order to dominate the entire Great Yu state, the rise of a talent like Yi Shiwen would be a huge threat to his future plans and must be eradicated as soon as possible. And this was going to be an honest excuse to get rid of Yi Shiwen, so he naturally would not miss it. Chapter 176. Imperial Guards are mediocre. The disciples of Yi Yuan School were having mixed feelings, and were happy and worried at the same time. There were excited looks on their faces while they were guessing that perhaps Yi Shiwen might block several moves. Moreover, the majority of people guessed that Yi Shiwen would be able to block only 10 or so moves. In fact, there were a lot of people who thought that he won't be able to block even a single move. In that case, it was too boring, because Yi Shiwen would be no different than several other outstanding geniuses, already trampled and crushed by the 8th prince. And then, there sincerely was no meaning to all of this anyway. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen actually showed the strength far more than they imagined. They discovered how ruthless he actually was. Moreover, not just ruthlessness, they also saw the terrifying strength of Yi Shiwen with their own eyes. It could be said that perhaps, even the strength possessed by the masters at the third stage of Truth Realm would be far less than his strength. And after 3 months, no one knew to what extent his strength might grow. And this was definitely a very interesting thing. which would definitely lead to an unusual but interesting battle, and should not be boring at that time. You dared to injure Lu Hao. Do you plan to defy the Imperial Guards? Jean Linger looked incredibly at Yi Shiwen. Do you actually think that the members of Imperial Guards are a waste like Luo Yifan? If not for His Highness wished to personally deal with you, any one of us Imperial Guards can easily trample him. Jean Linger looked coldly at Yi Shiwen. You have put your family in trouble. They will die without the burial ground. Well, now you have done it, Imperial Guards. Yi Shiwen sneered. You are nothing but a bunch of 8th Prince's dogs and you actually dare to threaten me. The Imperial Guards didn't know that they just now invoked the wrath of the Emperor. The talk about Yi Ziwen's family being in danger was more than enough to invite the wrath of the Emperor. Seeing a ruthless look flashing in Yi Ziwen's eyes, Jiao Shufeng quickly understood that something bad was about to happen. He was not like Jean Linger, who had always admired the 8th Prince, and any act of slandering the reputation of the 8th Prince was enough to enrage her. Yi Shiwen disrespected the 8th Prince several times and right in front of her, which thoroughly made her lose her mind. But Jiao Shufeng did not lose his temper because he knew that Yi Shiwen was very powerful. Although Lu Hao was quite reckless, but the members of the Imperial Guards were not ordinary masters. They were overall geniuses including strength and skills. But Lu Hao was directly sent flying by a single attack from Yi Shiwen. What kind of fighting strength did this Yi Shiwen actually possess? This scene had shocked all the people present there, because it was simply beyond the imagination of anyone. Yi Shiwen, we've come instead of His Highness to deliver the declaration of duel. We don't mean any harm. Jiao Shufeng stepped forward and immediately said, No harm? No harm you say, good one. Yi Shiwen laughed and said, First you threaten my family and now you even dare shouting in front of me. Since you want me to receive this declaration of duel no matter what, then I will, but in the meantime, I'd like to test the strength of the so-called Imperial Guards of the 8th Prince, and see how much formidable they actually are. Yi Shiwen shouted and used the coiling dragon palm, which he had already practiced to the Acme level. His palm turned into a dragon claw, glowing with a terrifying dragon chi, and instantly moved towards them. Yi Ziwen's attack was extremely powerful when compared to before. He had already practiced the first 2 moves of coiling dragon palm, to the Acme level, and all of a sudden, he demonstrated the full might of this technique. In an instant, the dragon chi overflowed the surrounding area, and it seemed as if a dragon had descended from the heaven to rule the world. In a blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Jiao Shufeng. Although Jiao Shufeng was not willing to fight with Yi Shiwen at this time, but when he saw this attack coming towards him, he was left with no choice and he immediately shot his palm. However, his palm technique was extremely abstruse and both of their attack instantly collided. Although he was at the second stage of Truth Realm, but both his skill and strength were far inferior to those of Yi Shiwen. Plus when it came to the palm techniques used by them, Jiao Shufeng's palm technique was nowhere close to the coiling dragon palm technique. And only in the moment, it seemed like Yi Ziwen's attack contained an irresistible force that instantly crushed his attack and fiercely blasted on his body. Bang! Jiao Shufeng's whole body was blasted away, and several of his bones were broken. He spouted a mouthful of blood, and almost lost consciousness after falling and severely hitting the ground. Even so, the disciples of Tianfeng Hall who were standing in the surrounding didn't react or intercept when Yi Shiwen suddenly attacked Jiao Shufeng, a disciple of Tianfeng Hall. Moreover, this was not a fight between Yi Yuan School and Tianfeng Hall, but Yi Shiwen and the 8th Prince's Imperial Guards. In fact, even a disciple of Yi Yuan School, Jean Linger was also a part of the Imperial Guards. Besides that, the disciples of Tianfeng Hall did not hold goodwill for Jiao Shufeng, because even if he was a disciple of Tianfeng Hall, he was still a member of Imperial Guards, and being a member of Imperial Guard was no different than betraying one's own sect. After all, the 8th Prince's ambition was to rule the entire Great Yu State and large martial sects like Yi Yuan School, Tianfeng Hall, etc. were going to become obstacles in the way of his ambition. And these members of Imperial Guards, without exception, were being manipulated by the 8th Prince. They were under his mind control, and were willing acting as his lackeys and were just like his dogs, so how could they possibly have any favorable impression in the minds of everyone? Yi Ziwen's black hair was swaying with the wind, his facial expression looked extremely cold. and surrounded by the dragon congealed from the coiling dragon palm technique, he was just like the emperor who had come into this world. And suddenly, for a time, Jean Linger was left in a somewhat absent-minded state while she was standing gawking in front of this invincible being. This was the kind of invincible aura she had felt only on the body of the 8th prince. However, this time, she felt the same kind of terror while standing in front of a much younger man. Impossible. In this world, there can only be one king, one god, and that is going to our 8th prince. You are nothing in front of him. As if the feeling of belief in her heart for the 8th prince had been provoked by Yi Shiwen, Jean Linger instantly started to shout like a tigress. She roared loudly, and the long sword in her hand instantly chopped out. Flying beauty! Jean Linger pulled out her long sword and released a bright sword light. She flew in the air and was just like a flying beautiful woman. She appeared very beautiful and graceful, but the long sword in her hands looked extremely cold like ice. Yi Shiwen knew that this was one of the secret techniques called Beautiful Lady Sword Technique, and only the true disciples of high-level sects could practice and obtain complete teachings about this technique. One could see that this Beautiful Lady Sword Technique had been practiced to a superb level. This beautiful woman was fragrant, but was deadly poisonous as well. Her ice-cold sharp sword instantly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest fear while facing her. His palm turned into dragon claws and grasped towards the incoming attack. In the next moment, that beautiful and ice-cold sword light was directly caught by Yi Shiwen, and then crushed to smithereens. How is this possible? How can your body be so powerful? It was simply very hard for Jean Linger to accept such an outcome. It was simply unimaginable. How could Yi Shiwen be so powerful to actually hold her sword attack with his bare hands, and then he directly crushed it? Such ability was really very scary. But she didn't have to wait long because Yi Shiwen immediately decided to give her the answer, by returning the favor with interest. He used Celestial Step and instantly arrived in front of her. A huge coiling dragon instantly congealed out of nowhere, and slapped her. Bang! Jean Linger could not hide from it even if she wanted to. She did not have the slightest chance to evade this attack, because Yi Shiwen had simultaneously used the Missing Moon Beheader along with the Coiling Dragon Palm technique in order to block her retreat, and she eventually had to endure Yi Shiwen's slap in the face. Poof! Jean Linger spouted out mouthful of blood, and her frail body was instantly blown away after receiving a slap on the face. This slap was so intense that her body was sent flying into the sky while spinning all the way, then fiercely fell on the ground. Yi Shiwen was not the type who would show mercy to a confused, chaotic woman like Jean Linger, but it could be said that he was slightly considerate about the fact that she belonged to the same sect as him. Otherwise he wouldn't possibly let her off with just a slap on the face. How dare you hurt us? His Highness will not let you off. Jean Linger did not faint and looked at Yi Shiwen with a pernicious expression on her face. Cut the crap. If you bother me anymore, I'll kill you all. Yi Shiwen said in a cold voice, and while saying so, his whole body was shrouded in an intention to kill. No one present there would take his words as a joke, because everyone could feel that Yi Shiwen was not in a good mood, and considering the current situation, he might do such a thing as he was certainly not a soft-hearted person. Jean Linger and the other members of Imperial Guards looked at Yi Shiwen with clear hatred in their eyes, but they didn't dare to speak anymore. They knew well that even a slight slip of tongue could lead to instant death. Yi Shiwen turned around and indifferently said, "8th Prince is relying on his Imperial Guards to go on military conquest of the world, but it in itself seems quite mediocre." Yi Shiwen, don't be so full of yourself. We are ordinary members of the Imperial Guards, and today, you have disrespected the 8th Prince's own Imperial Guards. Sooner or later, there will be high-level experts on their way to find you, and you may not even live till the time His Highness meets you. Jiao Shufeng said in a struggling voice. It doesn't matter who it is. If someone wants to step on my head, they better stay away, because even if it's a god, I'll kill him. Even if it's a devil, I'll kill him. Yi Shiwen's voice thundered and resounded throughout the sky. His voice proliferates everywhere like an undeniable meaning. Even after looking at the somewhat slim stature of Yi Shiwen, people still could not help but believe in Yi Shiwen's proclamation. They just knew in their hearts that he was not boasting for show, that there were no lies in his words. The disciples watching this whole thing from the beginning never actually expected that things would evolve so quickly and take such a turn in the end. The 8th prince sent his imperial guards to relay the declaration of duel to Yi Shiwen, which clearly showed his domineering and aggressive demeanor. But the things developed far more quickly than they imagined, and they actually discovered how stubborn and incomparably insolent Yi Shiwen actually could become in a situation like this. And they knew quite well that facing such a form of injustice where his own views were being ignored outright by the opposite party, his approach was quite right, and in the end, he didn't tolerate bullying and humiliation. These 3 members of Imperial Guards behaved arrogantly and held a superior attitude while notifying Yi Shiwen about the declaration of duel, which really angered Yi Shiwen. They kind of forced him into teaching them a lesson about who was actually the superior one. Many people were excited at these turn of events. Yi Ziwen's actions were tantamount to land a bitter slap on the face of 8th prince. Now that Yi Shiwen had flung a severe slap right on the face of the Imperial Guards, they won't let go so easily. They would certainly send the high-level Truth Realm Masters after Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen was also like a bottomless pit. There didn't seem to be any limits on his strength. At least right now, no one could compel him to display his full strength. But there was one thing for sure, that the collision between the two sides would certainly be earth-shattering. Chapter 177 Aftermath and Pressure. The matter about 8th Prince's declaration of duel to Yi Shiwen and subsequent wounding of the members of Imperial Guards at the hands of Yi Shiwen quickly spread everywhere. It seemed as if a forest fire had spread all of a sudden, and almost instantly, it became a hot topic of discussion for many people. That Yi Shiwen is also quite rampant and domineering. Gee, you didn't hear what he proclaimed in front of everyone. He said, "It doesn't matter who it is. If someone wants to step on my head, they better stay away, because even if it's a god, I'll kill him. Even if it's a devil, I'll kill him." And right then on the spot, everyone's complexion changed after hearing his words. Only a great man can say such words so confidently. He actually said that he would kill even the gods or devils if they try to come in his way. Damn, what a pity I was not present on the scene to witness it myself. The members of Imperial Guards are very arrogant and despotic, and relying on their direct relation with the 8th princes, they have offended many people, but this time, they did a big mistake by offending Yi Shiwen, because he isn't the type of guy who would sit back and take it silently. These members of Imperial Guards tried to pressure him and force their decision onto him. And this is no different than courting death. In the future, I am afraid that this is going to take an unpredictable turn. Although the 8th prince has obtained some treasures from the Devil Ruins, but even if we exclude him, the Imperial Guard still has a very terrifying master, and if he plans to come into action, then I do not know what will happen to Yi Shiwen, because he is much more formidable compared to Yi Shiwen. And even more frightening is that 8th prince, no one knows how much treasures he has obtained in the ruins, not to mention his inheritance as a prince. It is very hard to predict the new level of his terrifying strength, which must have gone against the heavens will by now. At this rate, perhaps in the future, he might really succeed in achieving his goal of dominating the entire Great Yu state. Everyone was talking about this matter, but Yi Shiwen was actually at his residence, and in his hands, there were some documents containing information about the members of Imperial Guards. While going through the documents, he suddenly found some shocking information. He discovered that all of the members of the Imperial Guards were the followers of the 8th prince, and almost all of them were truth-level masters. Some of them were at the 3rd and 4th stage of Truth Realm, and there was even a terrifying master at the 5th stage of Truth Realm. However, even a master of the 5th stage of Truth Realm had surrendered to the 8th prince, and was actually the commander of the Imperial Guards. So many large and small truth-level masters were loyal and devoted to the 8th prince. These documents were quite secretive, and were sent by someone related to Chief Ifan. On the orders of Chief Ifan, the sender of these documents must have researched and collected data about the 8th prince and his Imperial Guards. These documents also contained few words from Chief Ifan, addressed to Yi Shiwen, stating, "Crush that 8th prince." Yi Shiwen gave a somewhat forced smile. It seemed that Qi Fifan had shown quite a confidence in Yi Zaiwen's strength and thought that he was capable enough to crush the 8th prince. Qi Fifan could not take an action himself, because if he did then it would mean that Yi Yuan school thoroughly recognized this generation's conquest and was willing to participate in it. The relationship among the 5 forces was currently very stable, although they still despised each other, but there had been a mutual stability among them for quite a while. Every now and then they were also fastidious about a lot of rules. For example, seniority was one of them. Since Qi Fifan could not take an action in this matter because of his seniority, so all hope was pinned on Yi Shiwen. However, there was no assurance that Yi Shiwen would be able to handle this matter. After all, the masters of the Imperial Guards were really too many for him to handle on his own. If you can, Yi Shiwen did not want to stir up any trouble, but it was obvious that even if he wanted to, he would not be able to escape from this. The other party was not at all willing to let him off, and even if they decide to let him off, they would do it only on the condition when Yi Shiwen would kneel down on the ground and beg for forgiveness. And he would rather die than to do such a thing. Regardless of who it was, if they wanted to step on his head, they better stay away, otherwise whether it was a god or a devil, he would kill them all. Since it had already come to this, now, nothing could stop him from going all out. Yi Shiwen, the situation doesn't look good. Yi Mo frowned and said after reading the information about the 8th prince and Imperial Guards. There was a serious look on his face, although in his eyes, considering the time when he used to be at his peak, these people were nothing but a bunch of ants. But as far as Yi Zaiwen's current strength was concerned, they indeed were powerful and fearful enemies. I guess you are right. Even if I use the poisonous dragon water control flag, the most I can do is beat the masters at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm, but I think the next time, the 2 deputy commanders of the Imperial Guards will most likely make an appearance. Yi Shiwen thought and said. The Imperial Guards had 3 fearful masters. One of them was the commander of Imperial Guards, and the other 2 were the deputy commanders. Even the members of Imperial Guards based in the capital city would not be able to easily defeat these 3 masters, and even if one of the 2 deputy commanders attacked Yi Shiwen, it would still be a huge threat to him. Although the 2 deputy commanders were weaker than the commander of Imperial Guards, who was actually a master at the 5th stage of Truth Realm, but they were actually at the peak of the 4th stage of Truth Realm, and it would be very hard for Yi Shiwen at his current strength to defeat these 2 terrifying opponents. But the good news is that now I have some time to enhance my strength. The members of Imperial Guards won't come immediately. Yi Shiwen said. He knew that he would not be able to escape from this battle. The members of Imperial Guards regarded the 8th prince as their god, and whether it was for their own dignity or for the dignity of the 8th prince, how could they possibly let him off? For the glory of Imperial Guards and the ambitions of the 8th prince, they would never let him live. And if they could not find him, then they would most likely go after his family. And most importantly, Yi Shiwen did not want to concede. This was supposed to be a collision between 2 strong beliefs, a confrontation of martial arts, a fight between 2 martial arts beliefs, and he could not possibly back down. His practice was overbearing. He was supposed to be an overbearing warrior. And when a warrior like him was attacked, then he would retaliate and completely destroy all of his enemies. But the practice of the 8th prince should also be overbearing, so the battle between the 2 must be stunning. And this was only a matter of time. But the good news was that he still had time to improve himself, because he had just been informed that he could not participate in the upcoming competition. And the reason was very simple. After this incident, the other 4 forces strongly protested. They were never informed about the fact that Yi Zaiwen's strength was already at the level of true disciples, though officially, he was still an inner disciple, and was enrolled to participate in the competition among the inner disciples of the 5 forces. If a truth-level master like Yi Shiwen was allowed to participate in a competition for inner disciples, it would be like an outright massacre of the other inner disciples, which was very unfair. Although merely more than a year had passed since Yi Shiwen joined the main sect, but within this short period of time, the qualifications of the other new disciples was nowhere close to the current qualifications of Yi Shiwen. Now the news had already spread everywhere that he was already in the Truth Realm, and even the masters at the 2nd stage of Truth Realm were actually sent flying by his attacks. His strength was simply unfathomable. If he was allowed to participate in the competition of inner disciples, which was actually a mutual show of strength, a way to establish mutual deterrence, then the deterrence effect brought upon by Yi Shiwen would clearly be overkill. The four forces did not want Yi Shiwen to participate in the competition, so there was no way left for Yi Yuan School but to agree. After all, no one expected that Yi Shiwen would be intrepid to such an extent he had yet to officially become a true disciple. And so there was no way to just ignore the true disciple test and make him a true disciple in order to make him participate in the competition of true disciples, because the other forces won't accept it. Therefore, in the end, it was decided that Yi Shiwen won't participate in the competition. Yi Shiwen was also quite happy about this outcome, and was happily walking around to have a look and observe the competition of inner, core and true disciples of the major forces. These people were actually the highest level masters, representing the top talents of the Great Yu state, especially among the younger generation. However, everyone witnessed the formidable strength of Yi Shiwen, and members of Imperial Guards would certainly not go easy on him the next time they would come to confront him, which also meant that he must quickly prepare for his next confrontation with them. At his current strength, Yi Shiwen was able to deal with Jiao Shufeng and the other seemingly ordinary members of Imperial Guards, and he certainly didn't face any problem. But there were several other stronger truth-level masters in the ranks of Imperial Guards. All of this was once again compelling Yi Shiwen to think of ways to enhance his strength. Although recently stepped into the truth realm, but if it was needed to once again have a breakthrough, it should not pose any problem for him because his accumulation was quite deeper when he was still in the Xiantian realm. It could be said that this accumulation was deeper to such a terrifying extent that it might even be 100 times deeper than required for a Xiantian level master. This was the reason why he was able to set foot into the first stage of Truth Realm, and immediately made another breakthrough to reach the peak of the first stage of Truth Realm. And now he could have a breakthrough to the second stage of Truth Realm, all thanks to his prior accumulation in the Xiantian realm. So as long as there was an opportunity, he could break into the second stage of Truth Realm. And at that time, unless he was not attacked by the commander of Imperial Guards, he should be able to compete with the two deputy commanders and might even defeat them. For most people, if breakthrough was rapid, then they would face a situation of unstable inner state, because for truth-level masters, the comprehension of world laws was especially important. For a truth-level master, the degree of perception of world laws directly determined his strength. However, a lot of time was required to actually strengthen the gained insight about world laws. And therefore, after stepping into the truth realm, experts often stayed on one stage for a long time to gain complete comprehension. But Yi Shiwen was not the same as others. He had the help of mysterious space, and as long as there were sufficient spirit stones, the mysterious space could help him to quickly deduce the secrets of world laws and principles, so that he could quickly understand and grasp them. Others might take several years to comprehend and gain insight, but in Yi Ziwen's case, so long as he had enough spirit stones, he could amass the same amount of insight within the time period of few days. And after robbing so many pirates, Yi Shiwen did not lack spirit stones. Chapter 178 Great Immortal Battlefield in the Depths of East China Sea. In a huge battlefield, a person's figure was rapidly flying over. Yi Shiwen turned over the map. There was one of the ancient battlefields of East China Sea, and in accordance with the labeling on the map, it should be somewhere around here. This area was almost 10,000 li away from the coastline of East China Sea, and taking such a large distance into account, this area could be considered as the depths of East China Sea. At this time, there were two devil wings flapping behind Yi Shiwen. He actually gave birth to two devil wings, which could be used simply to attain improved speed and better maneuvering at extremely high speeds. Right now, Yi Shiwen was flying so fast that he was able to cover a distance of 10,000 li in a flight of just 3 hours. This belonged to a new school of magical powers that Yi Shiwen learnt from Yi Mo. It was called Devil Wings. Just from listening to the name, one could know that it was one of the magical powers of the devils. Moreover, it was also one of the top magical powers, and Yi Ziwen's skill was still not enough to wield it properly. If he had enough skill, he could have covered the distance of 10,000 li in an instant. Yi Shiwen didn't learn this technique earlier because at that time, only his strength was comparable to the masters of Truth Realm. But after all, he still hadn't stepped into the Truth Realm, so there was no way the Zhen Yuan in his body was qualitatively and quantitatively enough to sustain the consumption of energy while using the devil wings. Therefore earlier, Yi Mo did not teach it to Yi Shiwen. Now that he had devil wings, he could return to Qianji Island anytime whenever he felt like, and that too very quickly, no matter where he was. After all, Bai Majiao could begin the attack anytime. While using this type of top-class magical power of the devil race, energy consumption was very large. Even at Yi Zaiwen's current strength and skill, in order to cover the distance of 10,000 li, the devil wings actually consumed at least 70% of his energy, and in order to continue using it, Yi Shiwen had to consume spirit stones to sustain such a massive rate of energy consumption. At this time, Yi Shiwen had covered up his face and had transformed his appearance into that of a handsome and incomparably elegant young man, clad in white robe. Right now, from his transformed appearance, he appeared very handsome and suave. He was a human, and there was a battlefield of a race of sea-based demon beasts, less than few thousand li away from there. A super big faction was located there, and it was called Great Island of the Immortals. In the East China Sea, it was considered a very big force. Its strength was tyrannical, hardly inferior to a major force like Yiyuan School. This great immortal battlefield was a huge battlefield where the sea demon beasts of Great Island of the Immortals used to battle perennially, hence give it this name. No one knew how many martial artists and sea demon beasts had fallen in this battlefield. And not just masters of Great Island of the Immortals, even many experts from several other sects would come here to gain experience, in order to participate in most intense fights to hone their strengths. After arriving at the great immortal battlefield, Yi Shiwen immediately retracted his devil wings since displaying devil powers at this time was not suitable. Although in this world, practicing devil ways of martial arts was not a taboo, but practicing devil race's martial arts techniques was considered a taboo by most people, because by practicing devil race's martial arts technique, a human being could become depraved and eventually lose his humanity. However, just practicing devil ways didn't have any effect on a human being. In short, practice devil race's martial arts techniques would change the physiological characteristics of the human being, turning them into devils, whether they were willing or not. And as long as someone embarked on this road, there was no turning back. But there was no such problem in case of Yi Shiwen, because Yi Mo had taught him the most pure form of devil power techniques. Techniques taught by Yi Mo were not the kind of half-complete devil power techniques which were initially introduced by devil race in the human world. During devil race's invasion, in order to split up human beings, devil race had used some human beings as cannon fodders and had handed down some of their devil power techniques. But these techniques were incomplete, and devil race had deliberately introduced these techniques in order to turn human beings into devils. However, the techniques that Yi Mo taught him were the most pure devil power techniques and simply didn't have any flaws. Moreover, Yi Mo had also directly learnt their techniques from the great devil king himself. According to Yi Mo, his previous owner was already at such a high realm that he could instantly create power techniques according to his needs and requirements by using the world laws and principles which he could comprehend with ease. The techniques created by him no longer rigidly adhered to a certain race, because Great Devil King was already at such a level that he had transcended the limits of races. So Yi Shiwen did not need to worry, but he still did not want others to find out about his devil powers, otherwise, it would not cause small trouble. Unless and until his own strength was so strong that he didn't need to care about others at all, he would not openly display his devil powers unless absolutely necessary. There were simply innumerable sea demon beasts in the great immortal battlefield, and most of them looked formidable. It was needless to say that Yi Shiwen couldn't take on too many of these beasts at once, and neither did he know how many of these beasts he might have to kill in order to hone his skills. At a distant place he could see several huge-sized demon beasts. The strong demon beasts were devouring the weaker ones. It was a battlefield indeed. Yi Shiwen directly dived into the water and rushed towards the crowd of demon beasts, who were still fighting with each other. Yi Shiwen was a truth-level supermaster, He contained strong blood and vitality in his body, which was simply hundreds or even 1,000 times more than that of a Xiantian realm master. Yi Zaiwen's sudden appearance immediately attracted the attention of numerous demon beasts. They rushed towards him, some of which were simply tyrannical and fearful demon beasts, and so many of them were rushing towards him at once. The first group of demon beasts to attack him was a group of silver sharks. Each of these silver sharks was simply like reinforced steel frame swimming towards him at a very high speed. These silver sharks possess great strength and a very sturdy body. They could easily kill a Xiantian level master in one blow. These silver sharks were actually at the Xiantian 9th stage, and even the strongest of them were at half step into the truth realm. And these demon beasts were present everywhere in this battlefield. Although this great immortal battlefield had quite a reputation, but it was certainly not the most intense battlefield, nor was it the largest one. But it could be seen in the entire Wuxia that humans and demon beasts would frequently battle with each other. These battles continued from land to the sky, extending from sea to the land. They were fighting everywhere for their own survival and multiplication of their respective races. However, these silver sharks had steel-sharp teeth, and if bitten, even the truth-level experts wouldn't come out unscathed. Moreover, these silver sharks were at Xiantian realm, and they were using water-based techniques to shoot overwhelming amount of water swords toward Yi Shiwen, who had already come out of the sea water and was flying in the sky. If land was the territory of humans, then sea was the territory of demon beasts, and was simply like a forbidden for humans. Yi Shiwen finally had some understanding of this fact. These demon beasts would attack a human being on the very first sight. Missing Moon Beheader, Yi Shiwen shouted and immediately chopped out his long blade, instantly releasing a burst of blade shadows in the sky, which immediately formed a rain of blade shadows and rained directly on the silver sharks in the seawater. Dozens of silver sharks were chopped to pieces and were instantly beheaded by Yi Shiwen. However, the smell of blood attracted more and more demon beasts towards the place where so many of silver sharks had just been beheaded by Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen was merely a passerby, then looking at so many demon beasts rushing towards him, he would surely have spread his devil wings and immediately escaped. Just the scene of several demon beasts swimming towards someone was enough to send chills down the spine. The number density of demon beasts in this region was simply unimaginable for an average human being. Even if Yi Shiwen was flying in the air, he must be careful all the time in order to not get shot by water swords, because if he was to get shot and fell in the water, then he would surely be attacked by an unimaginable number of demon beasts. Yi Shiwen waved his long blade, and a protective layer of blade light completely wrapped him, which was enough to protect him from the attack of Xiantian-level demon beasts, and with each and every blade attack, he was able to kill a troop of demon beasts. The flesh, blood and essence of these Xiantian-level demon beasts were instantly absorbed by Tianyuan Mirror, leaving nothing behind, and their nadins were absorbed by Yi Shiwen, but at Yi Zaiwen's current level, this was simply like a drop in the bucket. Yi Shiwen was now a truth-level master, so the nadins of these Xiantian-level demon beasts were nothing more than a drop in the bucket. Killing these Xiantian-level demon beasts simply couldn't be compared with killing a truth-level demon beasts. There was a difference of heaven and earth between truth-level and Xiantian-level demon beasts. But Yi Shiwen was not worried, striking bit by bit, and with ease he was able to kill these demon beasts, although many of these demon beasts could terrify an average person. But it was impossible for these demon beasts to put even a scratch on Yi Shiwen. His real opponents would be those truth-level demon beasts. Truth-level demon beasts were considered elites among the demon beasts and possessed terrifying strength. While killing these demon beasts, Yi Shiwen almost did not have to use his Zhen Yuan. He slaughtered them by relying on his skills, and therefore consumed a meager amount of Zhen Yuan. He was simply practicing his skills and techniques on these demon beasts, and getting used to his newly acquired strength. Soon, the true test arrived for Yi Shiwen. A group of shadows could be seen in the water coming towards Yi Shiwen from a long distance. These shadows were walking upright and immediately attracted the attention of Yi Shiwen. He took a closer look and saw that this was actually a group of water apes. Their whole bodies were covered with blue fur, blue fangs were protruding out, not to mention, each and every one of them looked exceptionally ferocious. These water apes were considered the tyrants of the nearby areas. The demon beast residents of these waters were usually torn apart by the water apes. They were radically a kind of amphibious animals, considering they could survive on land and could also survive in deep water. Basically, water apes belong to a very special branch of ape-class demon beasts. The most notable thing about them was the fact that compared to their relatives who lived on land, water apes were several times more brutal and instinctively flagitious. The most fearful thing about these water apes was that each and every one of them was in the truth realm, while their leader, Water Ape King, was at the third stage of truth realm. This water ape family was just like a gang of neighborhood bullies. They not only relied on their fearful strength of truth realm, but also stayed in a large group, hence acting as a powerful deterrent in their locality. Children, go kill this damn human warrior. He has a very exuberant vitality and seems quite delicious. After killing him, everybody will receive a bite from his body. Water Ape King looked at Yi Shiwen, and there was a vicious killing intention in his eyes. Suddenly, the water apes were excited and bellowed. Chapter 179 Truth Second Stage. These water apes held high intelligence, especially the Water Ape King. His intelligence level was almost comparable to a human being's intelligence. These water apes surrounded Yi Shiwen in a circle, and used water law-based magical powers and coordinated their fist attacks at him. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. How he could possibly stay idle and watch while these water apes were actually planning to eat his raw flesh and blood. They really were courting death. Yi Shiwen ruthlessly waved the long blade in his hand without a shred of mercy in his eyes. Poochie. A water ape was directly split in half by Yi Shiwen, and its blood and essence was quickly absorbed by Tianyuan Mirror, while its Niden was immediately refined by Tianyuan Mirror. The refined energy was absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt a torrent of energy emerging in his body. A relaxing feeling spread throughout his body. Only demon beasts of truth level could actually benefit him and his cultivation. And in comparison, Xiantian level demon beasts could only be better than nothing. Although these water apes were mostly at the first stage of truth realm, some of them were at the second stage of truth realm, but none of them were the opponent of Yi Shiwen. He was basically displaying his incomparably tyrannical strength, and slaughtering them like it was a child's play. When Water Ape King saw how Yi Shiwen was effortlessly slaughtering his subordinates, he suddenly got angry, gave out a loud roar and rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. It was said that water apes inherited terrifying and ancient boxing skills in their blood, and once they were angry to the point of their blood boiling with anger, they could instantly display those skills. Water Ape King's fist blasted and brought up an endless tsunami, rushing toward Yi Shiwen to engulf him. Yi Shiwen shot his palm. Hidden dragon rises from the abyss. A huge amount of Zhen Yuan was instantly released out towards the rushing tsunami, and right when Yi Shiwen was about to be completely submerged under the water, his palm attack made an intersection. The enormous strength present in the collision made the sea water to seethe with excitement, and the entire sea level went hollow and sunk down, forming a huge trough. The surrounding sea water did not have the means to approach Yi Shiwen, because it was being completely cut off on the outside by the Zhen Yuan. Under the water, many Xiantian level sea beasts had been stunned by this fearful collision, and passed out on the sea floor. Yi Shiwen withdrew several steps. This Water Ape King was really extremely terrifying. Yi Shiwen was now strong enough to contend with the ordinary masters at the third stage of Truth Realm. But this Water Ape King was clearly a strong master at the third stage of Truth Realm, and was very strong. Yi Shiwen instantly opened his devil wings, and a surge of horrifying devil aura instantly burst out in the surroundings. What, you are not a human but a devil? The Water Ape King was suddenly alarmed and a shocked look appeared on his face. After all, there was a huge difference between a human and a devil. Those of devil race were instinctively cruel and aggressive. Human race simply couldn't be compared to the devil race. Yi Shiwen sneered and fiercely jumped forward. His figure instantly disappeared and left afterimages, while the very next instant, he appeared in front of Water Ape King. A color of surprise flashed in the eyes of Water Ape King, because at an alarming rate and in just a blink of an eye, Yi Shiwen had arrived in front of him. Although the speed of Water Ape King was not slow, but when Yi Shiwen used his devil wings, then his speed increased dramatically at this moment. Yi Shiwen's speed was far more superior to that of Water Ape King, in spite of his realm being far above that of Yi Shiwen. When Water Ape King realized that Yi Zaiwen's speed was superior to his only left was to spread his hands and deploy a set of extremely esoteric boxing moves in order to shield himself. Poisonous Dragon Water Control Flag Array. Yi Shiwen shouted and instantly launched 18 Surface Poisonous Dragon Water Control Flag Array, which then immediately flew in the air, forming a huge array of flags, and huge deep-water black serpents suddenly congealed out of nowhere. These serpents were emitting toxic breaths which rapidly filled the entire flag array with toxin. When the water apes encountered such huge deep-water black serpents, it was just like a group of foot soldiers bumping into a group of knights. Needless to say, their fate was sealed. Most of the water apes were sent flying by one tail sweep by the serpents, and those who even once came in contact with the toxin perished immediately. The might of 18 Surface Poisonous Dragon Water Control Array was simply earth-shattering. Within a moment, the nearby areas up to a distance of almost 100 li were contaminated by the deep-water black serpent and turned toxic, and the sea beasts present in the vicinity were immediately killed by the deadly toxin. These water apes simply weren't the opponents of these deep-water black serpents. Before they could even react, they had already fallen prey to the toxin, and not long after, only Water Ape King was able to survive this. Water Ape King suddenly got furious, because he never thought that he wouldn't be able to deal with a petty human being. Rather, in this situation, Yi Shiwen was simply like a super big iron wall. No matter how much he tried to kick, the iron wall simply wouldn't budge. However, at this time, there was no way out for the Water Ape King because Yi Zaiwen's 18 Surface Poisonous Dragon Water Control Flag Array had firmly trapped him inside. Although Yi Shiwen could only compete with the weaker master of the Truth Third Stage, but with the assistance from the flag, he could easily kill the strong experts of Truth Third Stage. Poisonous Dragon Water Control Flag Array was tightening and rushing towards Water Ape King from all sides. By that time, Yi Shiwen also went inside the flag array and rushed towards the Water Ape King. This flag array was made up by 18 deep-water black serpents, and its overall could be compared with a deep-water black serpent of Truth Third Stage. And right now, all of these serpents, together, were closing in on him, so there simply was no way for him to contend. Moreover, the Water Ape King also had to contend with Yi Shiwen. Soon, the Water Ape King was beheaded by Yi Shiwen. He seized the nightin from Water Ape King's body and digested it. Even after that, Yi Zaiwen's preying spree didn't stop in this part of the sea, not because he didn't want to stop, but truly couldn't stop. The reason because there was a steady stream of undersea demon beasts constantly coming after smelling blood spilled in this part of the sea. So there was basically endless number of demon beasts rushing towards this area, and he had no choice but to keep on killing them. It was because of this almost endless number of undersea demon beasts that this place had ultimately turned into a super battlefield for humans and demon beasts, famous throughout the East China Sea. During these 3 days among, Yi Shiwen continued crazy killings, to the point of turning the whole water bloody red in that area of the sea, which attracted the attention of numerous foraging demon beasts. More demon beasts meant more crazy killing, which resulted in the massacre of demon beasts, almost day and night, at the hands of Yi Shiwen, most of which were at Xiantian level. However, there were many at the truth level as well. Generally speaking, after the massacre of more than a certain number of lives and absorbing their nadins, Yi Zaiwen's breath had reached a terrifying level. Although most demon beasts would sense the breath of their prey and decide whether to attack or not. And at this time, Yi Zaiwen's breath was strong enough to act as a danger alarm, warning others to not get close to him. But since he had practiced restraining breath technique to the Acme level, he was able to conceal his real breath, so the ignorant demon beasts still continued to move closer towards him. And within 3 days after the crazy killings of so many demon beasts and absorbing their nadins, the amount of Zhen Yuan contained in his body had already reached a majestic level. Yi Shiwen felt that he would step into the Truth Second Stage at any time, and so long as he was able to reach the Truth Second Stage, he would be able to contend with masters of Truth Fourth Stage. And with the assistance of Flag Array and Tianyuan Mirror, he would easily fight off the master at the peak of Truth Fourth Stage. After the endless killings of demon beasts for all these days, Their blood, flesh and essence were absorbed by both poisonous dragon water control flag and Tianyuan mirror. After 3 days of crazy absorption of blood and essence from the dead demon beasts, the 18-surface poisonous dragon water control flag had a rapid development. 17 of them evolved to reach the point of truth 3rd stage, and the one, acting as the core of flag array, evolved to the extent of reaching the truth 4th stage, thereby dramatically increasing the total might. Tianyuan mirror was completely restored to the truth 4th stage, and hence had a power surge. Although it was only a short period of 3 days, but his strength really progressed by leaps and bounds. And now finally, it was time for Yi Shiwen to act. Now that he had accumulated a huge amount of majestic Zhen Yuan in his body, it had already begun to stir inside his body. Yi Shiwen even had a kind of uncontrollable impulse, making him aware of the fact that it was time to break through. And if he did not have a breakthrough now, then the Zhen Yuan would continue to stir up and might go out of control and end up exploding his body. Yi Shiwen opens his devil wings and made his way through the crowd of demon beasts while beheading those in his way, then flew out of the water, high into the sky. At this time, the demon beasts, still in the sea, used water-based attacks at him, but he used devil wings to block the attacks. The devil wings were mighty and enormous, giving full protection to Yi Shiwen while he was flying towards the clouds. After diving into the cloud, he decided to camouflage his own breath, and at the same moment, Tianyuan mirror appeared on top of his head and completely camouflaged his breath. Yi Shiwen began to have a breakthrough, also starting the unceasing circulation of Zhen Yuan in his body, running over and over in his meridians, while releasing the aura bit by bit. Yi Ziwen's energy accumulation had already reached the profound, to the point of being impossible even for a master of the truth 2nd stage. Even a master of the truth 3rd stage wouldn't dream of accumulating so much amount of energy in his body. Only Yi Shiwen was capable of achieving such a feat. The reason was that Yi Shiwen had practiced tyrant body technique, so his body could accommodate such a terrifying amount of energy accumulation. But right now, even he reached the limit, and if not had a breakthrough sooner, then his body would explode. Did not know for how long Yi Ziwen's aura continued to grow to the limit, then broke free from the shackles and suddenly burst out. It was mighty and enormous, to the point that even Tianyuan mirror could no longer contain his aura inside. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes. Finally, he broke through to the truth 2nd stage, and now the strength of the 2 deputy commanders of Imperial Guards was no longer a match of his strength. However, Yi Shiwen actually knew that this was not enough. Far from enough. Although now he was far stronger, the 2 deputy commanders of Imperial Guards, but one must not forget that the 8th prince was said to be at the peak of truth 4th stage, and he was so strong that a master of the truth 5th stage was his subordinate, so his strength could be imagined. Chapter 180 Devil Commander's Tomb. Although Yi Shiwen didn't want to spare even a single glance to the 8th prince, but the very existence of the 8th prince was inflicting pressure on him. Other might not say, but Yi Shiwen had come to understand the mindset of this arrogant prince. According to the hearsay, earlier, the 8th prince had been able to overcome the supermaster of truth 5th stage, but no one knew the current extent of his cultivation and strength. Not to mention, rumors said that he got his hands on the ancient heritage of a large faction. So considering all these points, his strength would have definitely progressed by leaps and bounds. And since such a person was hostile towards Yi Shiwen, so he was in lot of pressure, but these pressures were actually working towards transforming the strength of Yi Shiwen, making his strong, much stronger than ever before. And if things continued like this, then his strength would go beyond the strengths of 8th prince, then Qi Fifan and so on. Yi Shiwen possessed a strong heart, which was the basic reason how he was able to deal with any formidable enemy. None of the enemies were able to make him submit. On the contrary, they only forced Yi Shiwen to become much more powerful, and every time, Yi Shiwen diligently put all his efforts in becoming stronger. Yi Shiwen made a breakthrough and became stronger, but there was no way he would go back now. He seemed all prepared to begin the slaughter once again. But suddenly, he discovered many more warriors in the surrounding waters. Moreover, these were very powerful warriors, and almost each one of them was a master at truth 3rd stage or above. Yi Shiwen felt somewhat strange. What was going on here? What was the reason behind the concentration of so many powerful warriors in this area? One must know, although it used to be one of the ancient battlefields, but normally, not many warriors would come here because several years had passed and not many people wanted to come here daily. Generally, in a day one could expect to find only a handful of people in this place. But right now, Yi Shiwen suddenly saw the emergence of dozens of experts, and almost all of them were the terrifying masters of truth 3rd stage or above. It was quite unusual to witness the arrival of so many truth-level strong experts at once in this battlefield. In the end, what could be the reason behind this? While Yi Shiwen was still thinking about investigating this, suddenly a loud shout came from a distant place. He was surprised to find out that the voice belonged to a purple-robed female, who was currently fighting with a great shark in the water. Yi Shiwen noticed that she appeared to be 20 years old, had a curved small eyebrow, beautiful snow-white skin. She looked very beautiful and also seemed to be skilled in swordsmanship. Each of her sword strike was beautiful, as if stars were falling from the sky in the form of dazzling sword light. One could see that she possessed profound sword skills, and was also a master of truth 3rd stage, but right now she was facing a giant shark, which was a demon beast at the peak of truth 3rd stage. Its strength should be much stronger than that of the purple-robed woman. Although she possessed exquisite and outstanding sword skills, but it was obviously not enough to save her in such a perilous situation. After struggling for a long time, she finally fell under the wind, and appeared to be in a very dangerous situation. At this time, many warriors looked at this scene but didn't step forward to lend a helping hand. It was not like they were sinister people. Many of them were not necessarily bad, but there was always a lot of struggle for power going on in the sects and among the sects as well, which would generally morph their mindsets into that of selfish people who only cared of their own safety. Right now, they knew that if they went to save the purple-robed girl, then they might possibly suffer the same fate as her, so they were hesitant to come forward. However, unlike them, Yi Shiwen did not give much thought to this, and the moment he saw that the purple-robed girl was in danger, he directly flew towards her and simultaneously chopped out his long blade, releasing out a splendid blade light towards that giant shark. The blade light instantly arrived in front of it, and the next instant, the giant shark was chopped into 2 halves. Elder brother, this girl is called Qianqian. Many thanks to Elder brother for saving my life. May I get the honor of knowing Elder brother's good name? That purple-robed girl, Qianqian said in a very polite manner. Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen replied in a similar polite manner. It was slight effort, don't think about it. Yi Shiwen did not care about little things, and what he said was the truth because it really did take him slight effort to save her life. And from her appearance and gesture, she appeared like a diligent person to him. It seems Senior Yi is alone. Would you dare to come to the Devil Commander's tomb? Senior looks very skilled and brave for the job. Qianqian's awkward and polite demeanor suddenly shone up with brilliance and splendor, and a bright look appeared in her eyes. Devil Commander's tomb? Yi Shiwen had some doubts since he seemed to know nothing about it. Senior Yi doesn't know? Qianqian gave a somewhat puzzled look to Yi Shiwen, as if why did he come here for if he didn't know about Devil Commander's tomb? Well, please tell me about it, girl. Yi Shiwen said. If Senior Yi does not mind, then he can call me Qianqian. Qianqian said, although it was difficult to guess the age of a martial artist, but on the long road to martial arts practice, the difference of few years was nothing, the seniority only depended on strength. Just now, she was in a perilous situation while facing a giant shark, but the same giant shark could not even sustain a single blade attack from Yi Shiwen, and was split into 2 halves. This clearly proved that Yi Ziwen's strength was much higher than her own strength, and this was the reason why she addressed to him as Senior Yi. Although Senior Yi doesn't know about this, but I must say that it is not a secret or something. All of these people know about it. Qianqian said, this place is called Great Immortal Battlefield. I presume Senior Yi knows about this, right? And Yi Shiwen nodded. He knew about this, that's why he rushed here. This matter starts from Great Immortal Battlefield. The reason why Great Immortal Battlefield was opened a long time ago was that human warriors and demon beasts used to frequently compete for the control of this area, and this led to the outbreak of war, and also caused a protracted war of several years, which at last led to the formation of this ancient battlefield. Qianqian further explained, but there is a hidden reason about which no one actually knows. Originally, this place is actually a burial ground of a devil commander. In those days, the great island of the immortals and a certain demon beast country obtained news about this and severely fought in order to gain complete control of the tomb, ultimately forming this ancient battlefield. But initially, both parties had sent a large number of experts to find out a way to go inside, but they never found a way in. And this slowly led to the putting down of the exploration of this tomb. But who would have thought that the Devil Commander's tomb, that has been untouched all this time, will be opened, and this has immediately alerted the two top factions as well, but no one knows how this news was leaked and attracted a large number of experts. In the past, when Devil Army invaded Wuxia, a stunning war erupted between the experts of the two worlds. Many devil experts had fallen during the war, and they formed various tombs and cemeteries throughout the Wuxia to bury those devil experts. But the discovery of each of these tombs would always lead to an exploration by countless people, because these devil experts were extremely terrifying masters when they were alive, especially a devil commander, who was supposed to be fearful master above the legendary realm. The tomb of such a peerless expert would contain a multitude of priceless treasures, magical tools, magical weapons, etc. This was just like a fatal attraction for so many warriors. Grab anything and one could obtain tremendous amount of wealth. Yi Shiwen never expected that this ancient battlefield would turn out to be formed this way. Not to mention it was also a devil commander's tomb. Yi Shiwen, this is a good opportunity for us. I never expected to hear about a devil commander's tomb. Yi Mo suddenly said. In the devil world, a devil commander holds the rank of a feudal lord. There should be a lot of good things in his tomb. As far as other humans are concerned, I think it's impossible for them to completely utilize the treasures left behind by the devil commander, but you are different. You can practice legitimate devil arts, so you can definitely use these treasures. Yi Shiwen thought, perhaps this was an opportunity. If he could get treasures in this devil commander's tomb, then his cultivation might go a step further once again. In that case, there would be a greater certainty of his victory over the 8th prince. After all, this was the tomb of a devil commander, whose cultivation at the time of his death was probably above legendary realm. It was simply impossible to imagine the extent of his strength, and if Yi Shiwen managed to obtain even a small portion of his treasures, then it would certainly be a great advantage for his future practice. Senior Yi seems quite interested in Devil Commander's tomb. Qianqian openly said. And I will go and have a look. Yi Shiwen did not hide anything, and there was no need to hide as well. Such being the case, since Senior Yi is not part of a team, might as well join us. Qianqian said. Have you formed a team with others? Yi Shiwen asked. And Qianqian nodded. I'm not so strong like Senior Yi, so I cannot possibly wander alone in an ancient battlefield. This time, I have invited a few friends to come together with me. These are people who have dared to explore the Devil Commander's tomb with me. Yi Shiwen nodded, so that was the case, but it was not surprising that she formed a team because not everyone could be like Yi Shiwen. He was so outrageously powerful that he did not need a partner to wander around in this ancient battlefield. It could be said that Yi Shiwen was a one-man army. Invite a few friends to journey together was pretty normal. Moreover, a devil commander was supposed to be an unsurpassed existence, the so-called commander of formidable devil troops. Even if now he was dead, but no one would dare to look down on him. Not to mention, nobody knew what they might find in such a peerless master's tomb. There was no such thing as free lunch under the sun. If you want to obtain something, you must pay for it. But Yi Shiwen did not care. He believed in the saying, no pain, no gain, so he must face dangers in order to obtain something beneficial. Chapter 181. Join the team. There was no such thing as free lunch under the sun. If you want to obtain something, you must pay for it. But Yi Shiwen did not care. He believed in the saying, no pain, no gain, so he must face dangers in order to obtain something beneficial. But this time, the difficulty was not just the dangers in Devil Commander's tomb. He also need to be wary of so many other warriors. This time, many warriors obtained this news, Moreover, all of these experts were basically at the truth level. Some of them were even at truth 7th stage, 8th stage and 9th stage as well. As far as the eyes could see, there were countless warriors everywhere in this area. Probably, all of the top warriors in the nearby areas of East China Sea had come out to try their luck in Devil Commander's tomb. Since Senior Yi has not formed a team, then might as well join our team. Qianqian said. Well, deference is no substitute for obedience. Yi Shiwen nodded. Since he knew very little about this Devil Commander's tomb, so it was better to stick together with others. This was also good from the point of view of mutually taking care of each other. After Yi Shiwen agreed, Qianqian took him to an island, which was not a big island. It was quite spacious, but there were no spiritual arteries under the island, and therefore, there were no living things on the island. Not even a shred of vegetation was present there. Otherwise, it would have been occupied by demon beasts. Throughout the East China Sea, there were many islands with spiritual arteries, but there were no spiritual arteries in this big island. The reason why no one bothered to even name it. Qianqian and her teammates were going to meet up on this island. According to what she told, he came to know that Qianqian was a member of loose cultivators of East China Sea. In Wuxia, in addition to disciples belonging to major sects like Yiyuan School, there were many loose cultivators who were often considered as loners. They could come and go freely. Some were very weak, but some of them possessed earth-shattering cultivation level. Basically, it was hard to predict their strength, and they often consisted of good and bad people. However, in Wuxia, there were several small sects, with each sect housing only few individuals. Basically, these small sects were called loose cultivation sects, and when compared to giant sects like Yiyuan School, which was a home to several 100,000 disciples, these loose cultivation sects appeared just like shrimps in front of a shark. Yi Shiwen did not want to expose his identity as a disciple of Yiyuan School, so he directly said that he was also a loose cultivator, but he had already told his real name to Qianqian. Qianqian didn't suspect him, after all, although Yi Shiwen was very strong, but if he was a disciple of a major sect, then he would have definitely arrived here with his group of friends. One must not forget that this place was an ancient battlefield, although it was not the most active ancient battlefield, but it was still dangerous, so when coming here, generally, only loose cultivators would come here alone. Although they had been classified as loose cultivation sects, but in the end, all of them taught martial arts just like any other major sect. This place is located on the periphery of Great Immortal Battlefield, and is a relatively safe place. As we go deeper, it gets very dangerous since a lot of truth-level demon beasts wander in those areas. If we go further deep inside, then we will encounter even more terrifying demon beasts. As long as we are on the land, we are safe, but if go into the sea, then we will encounter overwhelming demon beasts. They are extremely frightening. Qianqian said with a lingering fear on her face. Fortunately, they rarely come out of the water, and when they do, their strength gets weakened a lot. Otherwise, humans cannot even think about having a foothold in the sea. The population of human experts was nowhere close to the population of demon beasts. It could be said that there were 10 times more truth-level demon beasts than truth-level human beings, but fortunately, most of these truth-level demon beasts lived in several established demon beast countries. Not to mention the total population of demon beasts in this world was 100 times more compared to that of human beings, but majority of them were still in muddle-headed mental state. Basically, they were no different than common beasts in general, and this was maintaining the fragile balance of power. Many masters have gone deeper into the East China Sea, but never came back. It is said that legendary-level mythological beasts live there. Qianqian said. Our sect had been flourishing very until the founder went into the depths of East China Sea, never to return, and finally, our sect declined to what it is right now. Yi Shiwen listened and sighed with emotion. Indeed, this kind of thing happened all the time in Wuxia. A sect's prosperity would always depend on how many top players it had. For example, in Yiyuan School, in a sense, if the core disciples, inner disciples or outer disciples were to die, then it certainly won't matter much. In fact, even if a true disciple was to die, then it won't matter. As long as the sect head and other leaders were alive, everything else was unimportant for sect's survival and prosperity. Yuan school was such a big sect, but the death of a legendary level expert was a major event for them, not to mention, Qianqian's loose cultivation sect lost a legendary level master, which was sufficient to determine the fate of her sect. The major difference between a major sect like Yuan school and loose cultivation sect was the dependence of the very survival of the entire sect on death of its top players. In case of loose cultivation sect, the death of just one important character could lead to the collapse of entire sect. And this was the reason why major sects would never give recognition and acknowledgement to the loose cultivation sections. But as far as Yi Shiwen was concerned, someday he would eventually travel to the depths of East China Sea. It would actually be a grand occasion, after all. Even the influence of the so-called Yuan school could not stretch up to those areas, but it was something far in the future. As for now, Yi Shiwen was merely a master of the truth realm, and could only wander back and forth in these marginal areas. He couldn't possibly think about going into the depths of East China Sea at his current strength. While Yi Shiwen and Qianqian were still chatting, suddenly, the air began to boil in the sky and several rainbows appeared to be flying towards them. It was obvious that they visitors weren't ordinary people. The rainbow light is enormous and powerful, and it seemed as if the river streams were converging in the sea at very high speeds. The rainbows directly rushed down and fell on the island's beach. As the rainbow lights began to disperse, the shadows of 4 people could be seen. The one standing at the front seemed to be their leader. He was clad in a splendid attire, had an imposing appearance and also had a heroic bearing, which was quite unusual. There was sort of self-satisfied expression on this face, but when he saw Yi Shiwen standing behind Qianqian, his complexion immediately changed and turned unsightly. A sharp look appeared in his eyes while he was staring at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen could easily read the look in that guy's eyes. He was secretly aware in his heart that this guy was troubled by his presence, but he didn't say anything. One could find these pampered and favored guys everywhere, who were often ambitious, successful, and were used to governing everything around them. They also considered women as their own property, and would naturally not allow others to intervene. There were 3 people standing behind this man, 1 man and 2 women. The man also had a heroic bearing and had an outstanding appearance, however. He could only be considered as low-key when compared to the man standing in front of him. He was standing there with a faint smile on his face, and didn't seem like an aggressive guy. He belonged to the category of those people who were unable to look straight ahead. Besides this man, the remaining 2 were women. One was clad in a yellow robe and the other was clad in brilliant orange clothing. Both of them could be considered as reigning beauties, but were slightly inferior to Qianqian. Senior Yi, let me introduce you to everyone. This is Su Yingdao, the most outstanding true disciple from the current generation of true disciples in the great island of immortals. I am afraid, his strength is not inferior to the strength of your mainland's 8th prince. Qianqian said. Earlier, Yi Shiwen had said that he was a loose cultivator from the mainland and didn't belong to the side of loose cultivators of East China Sea. Hence Qianqian said so. Yi Shiwen felt disdain in his heart, although that 8th prince had not yet made an appearance, but judging from the war declaration, one could make out that his strength was unimaginably. Even many experts of truth 5th stage were not his opponents. No one knew the extent of the 8th prince's current strength, but Yi Shiwen had already seen through the cultivation of this man. He was only at the peak of truth 3rd stage. His strength was far worse than that of the 8th prince. There was simply a huge gap between the strengths of these 2. In fact, his strength was not even comparable to the strengths of the higher-level Imperial Guards. However, it seemed like in the great island of the immortals, he was treated as a highborn. Then from the introduction by Qianqian, Yi Shiwen came to know that the other guy was named Qi Fei, and was also a strong truth-level expert, but he didn't belong to the famous clans of the great island of the immortals. Perhaps this was the reason behind low-key appearance. The yellow-robed woman was named Miao Lian, and the orange-robed woman was named Fan Yun. Both of them were at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm. Similarly, both Qi Fei and Su Yingdao were at the peak of Truth 3rd stage, and it seemed like soon, they should be able to become the masters of the Truth 4th stage. One could assume that they were considered outstanding experts in their respective sections. Qianqian, I hope it should be very clear that the place we plan to visit this time is said to be very dangerous. We may be unable to take care of ourselves. How do you plan to take care of someone else as well? At this time, Su Yingdao suddenly said while looking at Yi Shiwen. The hidden meaning in his words was very clear. Considering how he was looking at Yi Shiwen, it was obvious that he was talking about Yi Ziwen's cultivation, which was only at the second stage of Truth Realm. In other words, his strength should be regarded as nothing when compared to their strengths. Moreover, we have been running this team for many years and trust each other very much, but you go and start rashly recruiting new people into our team. What will we do if he harbors evil intentions? Su Yingdao continued to say. Yi Shiwen was looking at the side, with a hint of indifferent smile on his face, but he did not say anything. On the contrary, it was Qi Fei who tried to smooth things out and said, since Qianqian has asked this person to join our team, then she would certainly have a valid reason for that. We should first listen to what she has to say. At this time, everyone's attention was on Qianqian as she said, well everyone, do not look befooled by Senior Yes cultivation level. Although he is still at the second stage of Truth Realm, but he is actually much stronger. Earlier, I was fighting with a giant shark and fell under the wind, but when I was about to be killed by it, Senior Yi saved me. Suddenly, everyone looked at Yi Shiwen with astonished expressions on their faces. Chapter 182. The so-called putting to test. Suddenly, everyone looked at Yi Shiwen with astonished expressions on their faces. They knew well that Qianqian's strength was enough to make her part of their elite team. Needless to say, her strength was at the third stage of Truth Realm, quite tyrannical, perhaps not the strongest, but it was not weaker compared to their own. But when even a strong expert like Qianqian was unable to deal with an enemy, this man actually came to her rescue and saved her life. Not just that, according to what Qianqian said just now, that giant shark was split in half by Yi Ziwen's long blade. Perhaps this was the reason that shocked them the most. Considering Qianqian's diligent and honest character, they had no choice but to believe in what she said. And they were astonished just by thinking about it, because Yi Shiwen was merely at the second stage of Truth Realm, but he actually managed to display the strength beyond the second stage of Truth Realm. No matter how strong he is, this matter is very important. Our lives are going to be at stakes, and it is very difficult to say about the ulterior motives of this man of unknown origin. He may harbor evil intentions. I won't allow him to join our team. Su Yingdao said. Such being the case, I will be on my way then. Yi Shiwen wanted to join Qianqian's team in order to become familiar with some people and watch each other's backs in the face of dangers, but if this team was so unhappy by his presence, then there was no need for him to join their team. After all, just as Su Yingdao said, the most important thing for a team was heartfelt solidarity and cooperation. If he couldn't achieve this by joining this team, then it was better for him to walk his own path. Senior Yi, I think Su Yingdao says this because he doesn't know about Senior Yi's tyrannical strength. This was not intentional. Qianqian went forward to persuade Yi Shiwen, but she didn't know that her action and gesture made Su Yingdao feel even more wrong about Yi Shiwen. Firstly, the ulterior motives are not the only issue here. Even his strength seems dubious and questionable. I think that giant shark must have exhausted most of its strength while fighting with junior sister apprentice, which gave him an opportunity to take advantage of this, and that's how he beheaded the giant shark. Su Yingdao said with a look of disdain in his eyes. Qianqian was somewhat anxious. She didn't know what to say, but she did know that the strength of that demon beast was far above the strength of an average human expert. When she herself was at the point of utmost exhaustion and physical exertion, her strength was almost coming to an end, but at that time, the giant shark was radically just warming up. And not to forget that Yi Ziwen's blade attack was truly outstanding. But since Qianqian has said so much in your favor, then I am ready to give you a chance. If you manage to get out of the block, then I'll agree to accept you in our team. Su Yingdao said in a cold voice. It was obvious that he didn't want Yi Shiwen to join their team. Su Yingdao took one step forward and his aura firmly locked on Yi Shiwen. He then waved his hand and suddenly, a tremendous Zhen Yuan rolled over towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if the MT Tai itself was falling towards him. Yi Shiwen was enveloped by Zhen Yuan approaching from all directions, and instantly trapped him in a giant cage. This showed that Su Yingdao had already practiced the palm method to a very profound level. So you think you can trap me? Yi Shiwen sneered again and again. A moment ago, he was all ready to go, but it seemed like some people didn't want to leave. It was obvious that Su Yingdao was planning to use opportunity to redress personal grievances. He wanted to make Yi Shiwen suffer a loss. He might even try to find a chance and destroy Yi Ziwen's cultivation. Yi Shiwen could clearly see the killing intention in his eyes. You think you are comparable to that 8th prince? Well, I'd like to see for myself. Yi Shiwen said, then took a step, and suddenly, an unimaginable wave of vigorous Zhen Yuan burst out of his body. At this time, his entire accumulated energy was released at once, and a dreadful intention to kill was instantly swept off and firmly enveloped Su Yingdao. Suddenly, Su Yingdao felt a terrifying killing intention aimed at him. It almost washed away his state of mind. It was exceptionally fearful. He had never felt such a horrifying killing intention from a man ever before, but right now he felt it from Yi Ziwen's body. He actually did not know that for the last 3 days, Yi Shiwen had been fighting and killing non-stop. He literally hadn't slept for last 3 days and 3 nights, so one could imagine how many demon beasts had been killed by him during this period. One could say that this ceaseless slaughter had given birth to rivers of blood, and one simply couldn't count the number of demon beasts killed by Yi Shiwen in mere 3 days. Not to mention, many of these demon beasts were at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm, and some were even stronger than that, but he used poisonous dragon water control flag to kill the stronger demon beasts, and at that time, he was just at the 1st stage of Truth Realm. Now he was at the 2nd stage of Truth Realm, and after the breakthrough, he gained tyrannical strength. Yi Shiwen had to absorb the nadins of countless truth-level demon beasts in order to break from 1st stage of Truth Realm to 2nd stage of Truth Realm. So one could imagine the enormous gap between his previous strength and current strength. After killing so many demon beasts, Yi Ziwen's killing intention could be imagined, but he had to the restraining breath technique to completely hide his killing intention and true strength, because that would have scared away those demon beasts. But now, he didn't care and directly released out his true strength and killing intention. Since Sun Yingdao tried to trap in a cage, Yi Shiwen directly aimed his dreadful killing intention at him. Su Yingdao felt as if his entire existence had been pierced. There was no need to say that the monstrous waves of Zhen Yuan, released out from Yi Ziwen's body, instantly defeated Sun Yingdao's Zhen Yuan and directly annihilated his cage, then advanced forward and completely enveloped his body. Su Yingdao suddenly came to understand, perhaps, Qianqian was really stating the truth. This Yi Ziwen's real strength was far beyond his imagination, which shocked not just him but everyone present on the scene. This fact could shock anyone in this world. It was simply unimaginable that a master at the Truth 2nd stage would actually turn out to possess strength more than Truth 3rd stage. This Yi Shiwen was really a monster. Su Yingdao was at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm, and had always been referred to as a genius by his peer, but there existed a title above genius as well. It was the title of a monster. A monster was someone whose achievements, skill and strength could not be measured by the norms and established theories. In the past, he did not believe in the existence of monsters, but now after meeting Yi Shiwen, he had no choice but to believe that monsters really existed in this world, and were fearful experts. Not good. Su Yingdao shouted and took several steps back while using an agility technique, trained to the Acme level. It appeared that he only took a step, but in reality, he withdrew more than 30 feet in a blink of an eye. He was so overwhelmed by Yi Ziwen's strength and killing intention that he instinctively fled very far away. But at this time, Su Yingdao's entire body was covered in a protective turtle shell, made up of Zhen Yuan. It's that turtle shell magical technique. Qianqian recognized the technique used by Su Yingdao. Although the name of this technique sounded quite weird and tacky, but it was considered an extremely superior and secretive power technique by the people of Great Island of the Immortals. There were rumors in the sect of Great Island of the Immortals. They once surrendered a giant turtle beast and studied its super strong shell to obtain this turtle shell magical technique. It had been passed down generation after generation as a secret technique, and after constant improvements, The human race could finally learn to use it. Moreover, the defensive power of this turtle shell magical technique could shock everybody. There simply was no means to eradicate this shell, and once it was displayed, it was that even masters of truth 4th stage would find it very difficult to destroy it. Qianqian was aware of the strength of turtle shell technique, and knew that it was a very powerful defense-type technique. It could easily block the attacks from super experts, so at this time, she was worried for Yi Shiwen. What turtle shell magical technique? Yi Shiwen sneered and simply didn't give much importance to this turtle shell power technique. Yi Shiwen shot his palm, and the loud roar of a dragon resounded in the surroundings. His entire arm transformed into a coiling dragon. It lifted its face upwards and gave a long and loud roar. The coiling dragon instantly disappeared, and the next moment, it appeared in front of Su Yingdao. While facing Yi Ziwen's coiling dragon palm technique, the turtle shell magical technique simply didn't stand a chance. It was going to collapse from the very first blow. Yi Ziwen's coiling dragon dropped down from the clouds. There simply was no way for an average person to resist a mighty being like this coiling dragon. One could say that it was the most powerful young creature in this world. What kind of martial arts is this? Su Yingdao could feel a sense of intense dread crawling under his skin, and his own Zhenyuan seemed to be going out of control. He had never felt like this in his life. This was the feeling of bowing down and worshipping in the face of such a divine and mighty being. This whole situation suddenly sent him in panic-stricken state. How was this possible? He actually did not know that his turtle shell magical technique had been created using a giant turtle as basis, and there was dragon blood present in its blood vessels, so it could be considered as an inferior dragon species with turtle-like characteristics. And when the turtle shell technique was created, it was certainly related in some way with the original dragon techniques, which was the reason why Su Yingdao's Zhenyuan went out of control while he was facing Yi Ziwen's coiling dragon palm, which was supposedly one of the purest dragon-based techniques. The turtle shell's defensive power was completely crushed by Yi Ziwen's coiling dragon. Su Yingdao could not bear and immediately gave out a loud shout. Turtle trampling. From the collapsed shell appeared a huge turtle leg and dropped from the sky towards Yi Shiwen to trample him. It was made up from the combination of Zhenyuan and Lingqi, and although it was not a real turtle leg, but not far off as well. The other 4 had shocked looks on their faces. They could clearly see that Su Yingdao was cornered and anxious, so he had to use such a big move in a desperate effort. In the past, he would have never used it unless it was absolutely necessary in most urgent cases, but right now he had to use it just because he was actually cornered by Yi Shiwen. Besides Qianqian, others simply couldn't believe that things would actually come to this. Su Yingdao was naturally considered the strongest among them, and they always found him domineering and tyrannical. However, Yi Shiwen just used one move to corner that domineering and tyrannical Su Yingdao. They always used to listen to legendary fairy tales about such experts, but today, someone from those fairy tales appeared in front of them. Qianqian already knew about this because that giant shark was at the peak of truth 3rd stage, and demon beasts were often stronger than humans at same cultivation level. But even so, Yi Shiwen used just one blade attack to behead that giant shark. More importantly, Yi Shiwen killed it so effortlessly, as if it was child's play for him. Such level of skill and capability, such strength and fierceness, he is actually a monster. Qi Fei said with a look of disbelief on his face. Yi Shiwen looked at the turtle leg falling from the sky. It must have the weight of almost 10 million jin, and an average master wouldn't live after being trampled by it. What turtle leg, fuck off? Yi Shiwen shouted and released more terrifying and vigorous Zhenyuan from his whole body. This scene was simply shocking. The coiling dragon instantly flew towards the turtle leg and directly grasped it in its fierce claws. Chapter 183 breaks through the blockade. Yi Ziwen's entire Zhenyuan burst out in a flash, and in that moment, it seemed like the incarnation of a coiling dragon. Its claws instantly grabbed Su Yingdao's turtle leg, which couldn't sustain the incredible strength present in the claw, and exploded. At this time, Yi Shiwen seemed simply unstoppable to everyone present there. Oh my god! How can his Zhenyuan be so profound and vigorous? He is not a human, his strength is so terrifying. The people present on the scene exclaimed. It was simply unimaginable for them to see the profoundness of Yi Ziwen's skill. The Zhenyuan burst out from Yi Ziwen's body, pushed them several steps back again and again. Yi Shiwen rushed towards Su Yingdao and directly tore apart the Zhenyuan protective cover around his body, and the very next instant he grabbed Su Yingdao's neck. Senior Yi, please show mercy. At this time, Qianqian could not wait any longer and finally said. Yi Shiwen heard her voice and loosened his grip. He never intended to use extreme methods, was just taking advantage of this opportunity to stop Sun Yingdao. Yi Shiwen immediately retracted his dragon claw, which disappeared right in front of Su Yingdao. Yi Shiwen activated restraining breath technique, which immediately restrained his terrifying aura and crazily surging Zhenyuan. And after that, now to everyone he appeared no different than any other master at the second stage of Truth Realm. However, at this time, Qi Fei and others no longer dared to look down on him. His true strength was really too tyrannical, to such an extent that even Su Yingdao, the strongest in their team, was not a match. In fact, even if all of them joined forces and fight him, they still didn't a chance to put even a scratch on him. Su Yingdao was totally perplexed and didn't speak a single word. When he came to his senses, his complexion immediately turned very unsightly. All he wanted to do was to humiliate Yi Shiwen and show off in front of everyone. But he never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually be so difficult to deal with. He was really a dreadful monster. Do you want to continue the test? Yi Shiwen indifferently said, but it sounded like a humiliating satire to Su Yingdao's ears. This was equivalent to giving a direct slap on his face. Damn it. Su Yingdao said in a very angry tone. You think you can insult me just because you are stronger? At the worst, we will perish together. Let's fight to death. Fight to death, and with someone like you? Yi Shiwen said with a disdained look on his face. He immediately understood that this Su Yingdao had some serious character defects. He was so full of himself that he ended up underestimating Yi Shiwen. At first, he tried to humiliate Yi Shiwen, but being a victim, Yi Shiwen retaliated, completely overwhelmed him and also decided to show mercy. But rather than being sorry for his actions, he reverted with even more powerful roar. Please you two don't quarrel. It's time to go to Devil Commander's tomb. Let's give mutual respect to each other and aim for sincere cooperation. Quarreling like this is not good for anyone. At least give me face and forget about this childish feud. At this time, Qi Fei stepped out to smooth things out. I will give face to brother Qi Fei. Yi Shiwen lightly said. Su Yingdao looked at Qi Fei and other team members, and judging from their facial expressions, he understood that every one of his team members was going to speak the same words as Qi Fei. He immediately snorted and turned around without saying anything. In fact, even if Qianqian and the other members of his team were in favor of his decision of fighting Yi Shiwen to death, and even if they ganged up on him, it was simply impossible for them to take him down. Yi Shiwen was an incredibly strong guy, and it was not worthwhile to make enemies with such a guy. Not to mention, this time, considering the great caliber of Yi Shiwen, he could be treated as a very strong addition to their team, so no one was against Qianqian's decision to let him join. It was Su Yingdao's selfish motive to show off in front of everyone which ended up this way. Now Su Yingdao not only resented Yi Shiwen, he also felt uncomfortable and envious because of the presence of Yi Shiwen in their team. After everyone was prepared to set off, they discussed for a while then flew towards the depths of great immortal battlefield. Since all of them were truth-level masters and knew excellent agility techniques, their speed was extremely fast. Yi Shiwen was flying at a moderate pace, behind of the entire team. Qianqian flew over to Yi Shiwen and said with a somewhat sorry look on her face, I'm sorry, Senior Yi, I did not expect this to happen. It's all because of my thoughtlessness. Relax, it doesn't matter. Yi Shiwen smiled and said, Yi Shiwen, this time in Devil Commander's grave, I am afraid that you are going to face very troublesome situations. Moreover, this team only has Masters of Truth 3rd stage, and no one knows what kind of master will make an appearance on the way. Yemo said, I know. Even I think that this task is going to be very dangerous. We may encounter masters of half-step legendary realm. Those invincible masters of legendary realm may also have come for the treasure. But even so, we don't have other choice. Yi Shiwen said, 3 months, in just 3 months' time, we must face the 8th prince, so if my strength is not enough then I will most likely be killed by him. Yi Shiwen was sure that 8th prince didn't just plan to defeat him. He most likely wanted to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had gathered information about 8th prince from many sources, and judging from all that information, he had come to know that 8th prince was not a friendly guy and definitely lacked empathy. He was an ambitious man and his one and only aim was to stay at the top, above everyone else. Although right now, Yi Shiwen was not his opponent but had enough potential to surpass him in the future. If the 8th prince considered Yi Shiwen as a genuine enemy, then rather than waiting for a month for the duel, the best way would have been to strangle the enemy in the cradle. 3 months later, whether I am willing or not, there's no way to stop the showdown between me and 8th prince. Yi Shiwen said because he absolutely had no choice but to participate in the duel. It was beyond his control. The 8th prince had put him in this pressuring situation, and he could escape. So by all means he must enhance his strength in the next 3 months period. It was the only way out of this situation. It's the Devil Commander's tomb. Considering the level and status of such an incredible master, even half-step legendary and legendary level masters would drool over the treasures left behind by him. So it's natural that I'm going to see. Yi Shiwen firmly said. Yi Shiwen and other people soon arrived at Great Immortal Ancient Battlefield. However, it was no longer the same as it used to be just a few days ago when Yi Shiwen was mindlessly slaughtering demon beasts. Right now, the whole area had been blockaded by demon beasts. Innumerable demon beasts had formed a blockade, and were blocking up the sea water. At first glance, all sorts of strange and unusually demon beasts were visible in the blockade. In addition to Yi Shiwen, Qianqian and her team, a lot of other teams were also lingering outside the blockade line, and simply could break past. Lowly humans, you better quickly retreat. We have been ordered to form this blockade by our king. You humans are not allowed to go any further. At this time, a huge old mossback turtle said in a loud voice. Shameless, they usually don't form blockade like this, but now that they have obtained the news about Devil Commander's tomb, they actually formed this blockade. How outrageous! But what should we do now? These demon beasts seem powerful. Needless to say, this number is very scary. From this far, it is hard to guess. Maybe there are 1,000 or 10,000 and all of them are truth-level masters. Mere the sight of so many truth-level demon beasts is scary. Yi Shiwen was wondering about the reason behind this. There was an underwater kingdom of demon beasts, which was located at the boundary line of Great Immortal Battlefield. So the news about Devil Commander's tomb not only attracted many human masters, it also alarmed the demon beast kingdom. These demon beasts from the demon beast kingdom looked really tough and intrepid. Therefore the human forces could not go further into the East China Sea, and could at most occupy some nearby islands. Although there were a lot of demon beasts maintaining the blockade, but one must know that this was not the complete strength of Demon Beast Kingdom. These filthy animals don't stand a chance against us. While everybody was still considering what to do, Su Yingdao suddenly shouted. He was still pissed at Yi Shiwen, and it seemed like he was going to vent up his anger on these demon beasts. After that, he launched an attack towards the blockade of demon beasts. He released a turtle-shaped Zhen Yuan, which instantly rushed towards a demon beast of truth first stage and exploded, and the next instant, he rushed through the opening. Yi Shiwen and the other team members did not get a chance to stop him from being reckless. They also immediately rushed inside. Suddenly, Su Yingdao's action caused a chain reaction, and several other teams began to attack the defense line of demon beasts. Many strong teams directly broke through the blockade of demon beasts, but there were several weak teams that couldn't manage to break through and were killed after getting trapped in the barrage of endless attacks from demon beasts. Yi Zaiwen's team was certainly very strong. They instantly rushed past the blockade. Su Yingdao was being tyrannical through and through. He was naturally somewhat emboldened. This was a team comprising of several truth third stage masters, and their team could be considered as a very formidable team. They directly swept inside without facing much difficulty. Yi Shiwen also following from behind, because many warriors were rushing in from all sides, so he did not need to withstand all of the attacks, only a part of it, which was not a serious problem at his current strength. However, Yi Shiwen still didn't have a shred of relaxation, because he tried to sense and cultivation levels of the demon beasts present in this area, but he couldn't sense strong demon beasts. He couldn't find the trace of demon beasts at first stage of Truth Realm or above. A huge demon beast kingdom was supposed to be located nearby. Then why weren't the 5th stage demon beasts or above present in this area? The only explanation for this could be that the higher level demon beasts had already entered the Devil Commander's tomb, and a large number of strong experts must have been deployed. That's why he couldn't sense strong demon beasts. Although this was the case, but getting past the blockade of thousands of truth-level demon beasts was not a simple matter. However, thanks to the well-timed coordination and unusual tacit understanding between Su Yingdao and the other team members, helped the entire team in safely rushing in towards the core area of Great Immortal Battlefield. And Yi Shiwen used his poisonous dragon water control flag array to shield himself, and basically went on rampage all the way. After flying for nearly an hour, only few teams managed to reach the core region of Great Immortal Battlefield. But after approaching the core region, suddenly, they began to encounter stronger demon beasts. Mostly Truth First Stage and Second Stage demon beasts were present on the periphery of Great Immortal Battlefield, but the strength of demon beasts increased considerably once they reached the core region. Here, even the weakest demon beast was at the 3rd stage of Truth Realm. However, only a handful of them were present there. They were very less in numbers when compared to thousands of demon beasts on the periphery. Otherwise, even if Su Yingdao's team was strong, they would still die miserably. In the sky, occasionally, formidable masters of Truth 5th stage or above could be seen directly diving into the sea. The Devil Commander's tomb had finally arrived, and it was located deep inside the sea. Chapter 184. Bones of the Dead everywhere. Everyone looked at each other, nodded and dived into the seawater. They covered themselves in the protective layer of Zhen Yuan. Yi Shiwen was the only one who used the soul guard of Deepwater Black Serpent, because it could help him in breathing freely in the deep waters, just like breathing on the land. The people dived all the way, and actually at this time, one could also see that the fight was going on between many demon beasts and human warriors. Many human warriors had already arrived here and many of them were fighting alone. Plus all of them were at Truth 5th stage or above. The reason why they were able to handle so many demon beasts vertically and horizontally. Although right now Yi Shiwen was part of a team like many other teams present there, of course, he was capable enough to be on his own, and he would still be able to deal with demon beasts, but in the end he was unfamiliar with the location of tomb. Hence could go his own way, otherwise he wouldn't know where to dive. After diving all the way, in the midway, they encountered many horrifying Truth 5th stage demon beasts. The good news was that Yi Shiwen would generally sense and discover them from afar, and everyone would pick up speed. That's how they were able to avoid Truth 5th stage demon beasts. At this time, Su Yingdao and the others had a faint idea emerging in their hearts that they should never have come here. In this place, terrifying demon beasts of Truth 5th stage or above were present everywhere. Never in their wild dreams had they ever expected to see so many terrifying demon beasts at one place. They simply didn't stand a chance even against one of these fearful demon beasts, and there were so many of them. After they had a small half-hour dive, they finally explored the seabed, but what they saw was a horrible sight. The surrounding seabed area in the radius of thousands of miles was covered in endless bones of the dead, camouflaging the entire seabed. These bones of the dead actually belonged to all those supreme masters and demon beast races, which were killed by the Devil Commander in his lifetime. Sadly, even the souls of these masters had been detained by the Devil Commander above the bones of the dead. They had to suffer endless torment generation after generation, and simply couldn't go into the cycle of rebirth. They were forced by the Devil Commander to go through this eternal suffering, and one could easily feel the lurking, extremely frightening breath everywhere. After the Devil Commander was dead, these bones of the dead paved his mausoleum, guarding his corpse for millenniums, years after years, for God knows how many years. Everyone who watched this scene suddenly gasped and held their breaths. This was just too horrible, And in these bones of the dead, occasionally, some of the bones would condense into humanoid shapes or into the shapes of various demon beasts. These demon beasts or human masters once used to be the powerhouses, who were later beheaded by the devil commander. The bones of the dead had been able to maintain the magical powers from the times when they were alive. This was extremely frightening. At the very first glance, Yi Shiwen was able to guess that some of these bones of the dead belonged to the masters who must have died before the devil invasion era. But now, even they had been driven by devil commander to show their graceful obligation. Hence he could sense wild screams everywhere. These were the heroes who paid their lives in order to resist against the devils, so now they should not be treated like this. Even after death, there had been compelled by devil commander to work for him. Yi Shiwen thought this and felt his heart getting filled with grief and indignation. As he was approaching, he could clearly feel wails everywhere. The grievances and resentment were monstrous. Hate, hate, hate. I wish someone would obliterate devils from this world. I resent, resent, resent. I died before my troops could attain victory. In a flash, the melancholy and resent of so many dead masters wholeheartedly influx into Yi Ziwen's mind. However, Qi Fei and other team members didn't show much concern to this. However, Yi Shiwen felt his heart being filled with anger, as if he was like a magnet, attracting endless sadness from all directions, flooding directly towards Yi Shiwen. These grievances, resentments, when accumulated in larger concentrations, could actually distort the space. In other words, this cemetery had actually passed through years after years, for ages, despite having the distortion in space. Since the space distortion had been going on for ages, it was already regarded as a half-plane, and it was not possible to directly pass through it. They must break open the space and go through the opening to the tomb. Generally speaking, only the masters of legendary realm were able to break open spaces, but obviously, this half-plane had a very unstable space, so it was easier to break it open. But even so, a truth-level master was still needed in order to break this half-plane and make the opening for enough time to go through it. Yi Shiwen direct rushed down, having the intense feeling in his heart to break this space open. He suddenly gave a loud shout and chopped out his long blade, which made a crack in the space, and he immediately entered the space from where the cracks appeared. Suddenly, an even more bizarre and cold aura than before swept towards him. The cold and cloudy mochi was wanton flowing everyone. Everyone's complexion changed slightly. It was obvious that the presence of mochi in the surroundings was making them uncomfortable. Only Yi Shiwen was the exception. Not only he did not feel uncomfortable, on the contrary, by performing conversion using Tianyuan mirror, Yi Shiwen could absorb the mochi present in the cold aura, spreading a very comfortable feeling throughout his body. Because of the heavy concentration of mochi in the surroundings, it was basically impossible for everyone to use soul search. Even if they tried to use soul search, it would be directly swallowed by the mochi, covered with resentments. Yi Shiwen was the only exception. He was not afraid of his soul search being swallowed by those resentment-covered mochi, since his Tianyuan mirror had an inbuilt restraining function on anything related to the devils, including mochi. But when Yi Shiwen used soul search, he discovered that it was impossible to completely investigate the entire stretch of tomb. However, Yi Shiwen and the other team members did not dare to approach the bones of the dead, spread everywhere on the sea floor, so they could only float above. Looking at the bones of the dead everywhere on the seafloor, the hearts of everyone had a kind of chilling feeling. Even if numerous years had passed, these bones were still exuding a jade-like gloss. It appeared sacred and flawless. These bones also indicated that it didn't matter how terrifying and peerless those experts would have been back in those days when they were alive, but they still actually died at the hands of the devil commander. Moreover, from the sheer quantity of bones of the dead, one could make a guess how terrifying that devil commander must be when he was alive. But even so, despite being so tyrannical, the devil commander was now dead. He couldn't escape death. A lifetime of fame and glory certainly couldn't save him from death, but one could certainly say that he must have been strong to unimaginable proportions. As everyone was overwhelmed from the scene present in front of their eyes, suddenly, a violent fluctuation of dead chi took place beneath the piles of bones of the dead, and a skull and nearby bones instantly condensed into a human form. With a bone sword in his hand, and immediately chopped out a terrifying sword key towards Yi Shiwen. The figure of a dragon immediately congealed out of Yi Ziwen's body, and directly skimming out towards the incoming sword key. It didn't take even an instant for the coiling dragon to grab the sword key in its claws, and then completely crushed it. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and immediately chopped out his long blade, releasing an enormous bladiki towards that skeleton. Bang! Bladiki rushed unobstructed and collided into the bones of the dead. The very next instant, the sound of breaking bones was heard by everyone present on the scene. Actually, some of the bones of that skeleton immediately cracked upon Yi Ziwen's attack, but it was still not defeated. Everyone was astonished at this scene. They could feel that although it was only a simple blade attack, but the power contained in it was not small, but still could not destroy that skeleton warrior. This indicated that he was too strong and tough. The extent of toughness of these bones is really reaching the point exaggeration. I am afraid before death. This skeleton warrior was absolutely an invincible master of truth 7th or 8th stage. Qi Fei said with an incredible look in his eyes. Even in a major sect like Yiyuan school, the invincible masters of truth 7th or 8th stage were considered among the small number of top elites, but here, there was actually a dense crowd of such invincible masters everywhere. I will help you in getting to the other side. Yi Shiwen lightly said. Even after death, this skeleton warrior was being manipulated, had become someone else's watchdog. This was such a sad thing. Yi Shiwen chopped out his long blade once again, and in a flash 9 blade shadows appeared out of nowhere, and rushed towards the skeleton warrior and crashed into his body, breaking his body into multiple fragments. These bone fragments crumbled and fell on the seafloor, while at the same time, the dark evil spirit hidden in the skeleton was also instantly beheaded by Yi Shiwen. Obviously, the reason behind the existence of these evil spirits was due to the contamination of souls by the presence of endless machi in the surroundings, giving rise to wisdom but with only killing instinct. These were the so-called evil spirits. Even on the remains of some of the formidable powerhouses, the born evil spirits would recover a portion of the memory from their past lives, and hence could put forth the magical powers from the past as well. If their team was to encounter the evil spirit on the bones of an evildoer, it would simply be a dead end for them. According to the map, the Devil Commander's tomb is located somewhere in the central areas of this place, covered in the bones of the dead. Qi Fei took out the map, inspected for a while and said, "Right now, we are only at the periphery and still encountered such terrifying dangers. If we continue to go deeper towards the central areas, we may encounter formidable enemies, and dealing with them may be beyond our own capacities. Now that I made this clear to everyone, if you don't want to go, now is the time to quit." However, everyone was silent for a moment. No one wanted to quit. After all, they already arrived after facing so many difficulties, and if they quit at this time, it would be really aggrieving and depressing. Moreover, they were a proud and arrogant team of elites. How could they possibly accept such an outcome? Since no one wanted to quit they didn't continue to delay, and immediately resumed the journey to the tomb. On the way, they encountered other warrior teams and lone warriors as well, but since everyone was in a hurry, there was no intersection. Along the way, they once again encountered an attack from skeleton from the bones of the dead. This attacking skeleton seemed to be made up of jade crystal, indicating that most probably during his lifetime, he was a powerhouse at an extremely profound level, but now, there is no awareness left in him. He had simply become someone's slave. But nevertheless, this dead powerhouse, although now only a skeleton, was still very difficult to deal with. Later, Yi Shiwen shot less and less. Generally, whenever he attacked, it was always the last shot because he already noticed the killing intention in Su Yingdao's eyes. He was repeatedly redirecting the attacks from the skeletons towards Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen was strong enough to resist. But Yi Shiwen also slowly began to reduce the number of attacks on skeletons, and focus more on being wary of Su Yingdao. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.